The divine palm appeared. Genre: ancient swordplay. Author: unknown. After listening, please comment on your feelings, and don't forget to subscribe to listen to the latest episode. Episode 6. Chapter 29. Hatred piles up. The next morning, on the top of Thiat Hong Mountain, only corpses were left lying scattered among piles of collapsed bricks and tiles. Fresh blood splattered everywhere, mixed with a fishy smell and a strong burning smell, making people feel nauseous to the point of vomiting. The team of red-shirt soldiers on the mountain quietly withdrew from Thiat Hong Sun, one by one, returning to the forest where the horses were hidden to rest, find water to drink and bathe. Not long after, several people sent to scout the water source returned to report that not far behind the forest there was a lake of clear water, with fish swimming clearly visible. Kim Phi immediately ordered the brothers to get on their horses one by one and go straight towards the lake. Run about 3 miles to reach the lake shore. The lake is more than 4 meters wide, more than 1,000 meters long, and the water is as clear as a stream. The whole team jumped into the lake to bathe and play happily. Only Kim Phi stood on the shore, frowning thoughtfully. Why can't Phuong Tran Tien and the 5 Bo 7 souls be seen? Even Ta Phuong, the leader of the Thiat Hong gang, is missing? Maybe they have another lair? Or has Sino 2C's plot begun? Are they already active in the streets? He did not dare to confirm, but he was certain that sooner or later the plot would come into play, and it would be difficult for him to avoid a decisive battle. At that time, I'm afraid all Bitch Ba Bang brothers will have to mobilize. If Ta Phuong really followed Sino 2C, then things would be extremely complicated. As the sun rose, Kim Phi ordered the whole team to stay there, waiting until night before continuing on their journey. That very day, shocking news spread across the world. Thiat Hong Gang's appointment with Commander Kim Huck took place on Mid-Autumn Festival night. The battle ended with the defeat of the Thiat Hong Gang. More than 500 people died, while the enemy side had only 20 people. On the night of the 16th, the entire Bitch Ba Gang attacked the Thiat Hong Gang headquarters on Thiat Hong Mountain. All of the Thiat Hong Gang's experts were slaughtered, leaving no one alive. Bitch Ba Bang's tricks are truly unique in the world. So the gangsters rose up again. Dedicated people everywhere are extremely worried, afraid that a great disaster is about to strike. There are also many people who believe that only Bitch Ba Bang can extinguish that disaster. That day, the Bitch Ba Bang brothers rested and played on the shore of the lake behind Thiat Hong Bang's mountain. It wasn't until it was dark that they started their journey. The target this time is the Black Sat site on Tien Muk Mountain, in Triad Jong Province. Kim Phi decided to first destroy the Black Sat site, then search for his background and see where his parents were. After that, he will go to Thuong Quan Bao to avenge his master. Thinking about Black Sat Trang and Thuong Quan Bao, he couldn't help but think of Tran Du Du and Thuong Quan Lo Chao. Comparing the two people, he saw that everyone had their own strengths and weaknesses. In terms of appearance, a person like Tai Ti, a person like Chiu Quan, are both like fairies descending to earth, incredibly beautiful. As for temperament, Thuong Quan Lo Chao is outrageous, while Tran Du Du is too cruel. At that moment, Lai Hong's figure suddenly appeared in his mind. Thinking of her, Kim Phi silently scolded, "This girl is so lecherous, why am I even thinking about her?" But the more I tried not to think, the more haunted her image became. The group of people crossed one mountain after another, walking until midnight. The battle-hardened army had penetrated deep into the rolling mountains. Suddenly, from behind the mountains came a terrible howl. Especially Kim Phi, when he heard that cry, he shuddered the most, because he felt that it was the cry of a person unwilling to die, as if he was being suppressed by a terrible force, unable to resist. As soon as the howl ended, everyone woke up in a spirit of chivalry. As for Kim Phi, he felt that the cry was extremely familiar, but for a moment he still couldn't remember whose voice it was. He immediately raised his hand to signal the team to stop, then turned to instruct Long Diane. "You just keep leading the army. Let me alone go to the place where the cry came from and see what happens, then I'll come back and follow you." Long Diane asked worriedly, Do we need one or two of our subordinates to follow the clan leader? Bokkat and Quan and Loyan also asked in unison. Let the two of us follow. Kim Phi smiled, shook his head and replied, no need. If anything happens, we alone can deal with it. Having finished speaking, he jumped off the horse's back, his body soared high, flying away while saying, you guys continue to advance, temporarily led by Long Diane. His voice still echoed, his shadow had completely disappeared into the night. Behind, the sound of horse hooves echoed like thunder. The Bitch Ba Bang brothers under the command of Long Diane continued to move forward. Kim Phi uses the Long Van Dun technique. His body is as fast as the wind, his clothes flutter in the air. In just a blink of an eye, he crossed 4 mountains. Passing the 5th mountain, before his eyes appeared a flat field, looking like a valley, surrounded on all 4 sides by high mountains. As soon as he rushed down from the top of the mountain, he saw 2 dark shadows jumping up from the edge of the forest ahead. At the same time, a soft voice came. Master, is he Master Kim Huk's master? Oh my God! That is Lai Hong's voice. Right after that, he heard Van Sun Nun's voice coldly reply, that first ghost should have died a long time ago. Hong Mi, from now on, Master forbids you to get close to that kid again. Lai Hong choked up and replied, Master, you. Hong Mi, no. No. Don't follow you anymore. The voices of the 2 people grew farther and farther away, gradually disappearing in the darkness. Kim Phi only felt dizzy and almost collapsed. He quickly stopped, tried to calm down, and muttered, no. It can't be my master. How could my master go down the mountain? He did not believe that Kim Mong Hong, his master, had been murdered. However, the image of an old man with white hair and haggard appearance appeared in his mind, half of his body lying in a pool of blood, being slaughtered by 2 senior brothers, groaning as if he was about to die. Kim Phi quickly rushed to the edge of the forest. Before his eyes were several corpses piled up on the ground. He guessed that this place had just experienced a fierce battle. The closer he got, the slower his steps became, his heart trembling with fear, for fear that he would recognize his master's body in the pile of corpses, to the point that he did not dare to continue. Suddenly a familiar groan rang out. Kim Phi shivered, tears welled up in his eyes. Clearly, there are people still alive in the pile of corpses. Phi Ni, where are you, at this hour? I want to see your face. Oh no, no. I can't see anything. Phi Ni. I just want to touch your face and your mother's face. Oh God, why is God so unfair? Phi Ni, the people of Qtien Dao Palace want to kill you. Sino 2C also wants to kill you. Oh God. I don't want to die early. The old man lying on the ground tried to get up, but his whole body trembled and he was completely unable to stand up. Kim Phi did not expect his master to be surrounded and beaten to such a degree. He did not dare to speak up, afraid that if he suddenly appeared, his master would be too emotional and difficult to bear. Even so, he still slowly walked in front of the old man. At this time, Kim Phi clearly saw old knight Kim Mong Hung lying in a pool of blood. His arms and legs were cut off, his face covered in blood, extremely miserable. When Kim Phi arrived, the old man opened his dull eyes and said softly, God. I heard it. It was the footsteps of death. He didn't want to die. He didn't want to die early. He also wanted to see Phi Ni. Kim Phi couldn't hold back anymore. Tears flowed from his eyes. He bent down, used his internal energy, and whispered softly in the old man's ear, Master. I'm Phi Ni. I'm back. When Kim Mong Hung heard his voice, his spirit suddenly shook and he trembled and asked, Really Phi Ni, is that it? His right eye was only a bloody socket, the pupil was gone, tears mixed with blood were falling continuously. Kim Phi quickly took out the medicine from his body and put it into his mouth, brought his face close to his master's, and choked up and asked, Master, who did this to you? Kim Mong Hung panted and slowly said, Phi Ni, Hearing that you are famous in the world, Master is very happy. Who would have thought that when I arrived at Wuxia's son, I would hear that you were murdered by Wuxia Ma Quan. My heart was so painful that I immediately went down the mountain to avenge you. Then when I came to Jiangnan and heard that you had reappeared, I only wanted to see you again once. I didn't expect to be followed by people from the 9 Tien Dao Palace, and then heard that Sino 2C had reappeared, wanting to kill me. The old man's voice gradually weakened. Then Master met them here. More than 20 experts surrounded and killed me, intending to use me as bait to lure you over. Fine, from now on, you have to be very careful. No need to worry about Master anymore. Before he could finish the last sentence, Kim Mong Hung stopped breathing. Kim Phi was in extreme pain, face up, and cried, "Master! Master! Master!" His tears flowed continuously like rain. After a long time, Kim Phi could suppress her sadness, raised her head to look at the moon, her face showing murderous intent, gritting her teeth and swearing, "Holy Master, please bless Phi Ni to kill all enemies and take revenge today." Having finished speaking, he bent down to look at his master's body. His arms and legs were all amputated, his body was covered in cuts. It was so miserable that he couldn't bear to look at it. The pain surged, he burst into tears again. Thinking of the 2 teachers and students Lai Hong, he gritted his teeth in hatred. If you and your teacher were willing to come to our rescue and hold out a little longer, would we have arrived in time? Why did my master have to die so tragically? Not only did he see that death would not save him, he also said that my master deserved to die. That teacher and student really deserve to die. The next time we meet again, I will definitely not forgive, especially the Van Sun goddess. She is truly worthy of being killed. Then he thought coldly again. As for Q Tien Dao Kung and Sai Confucian 2C, they all deserve to die. A bloody picture appeared in his mind, several villains rolling around in a pool of blood, screaming in repentance. Kim Phi laughed loudly with joy. His loud laughter made the birds in the forest fly away in panic. But the laughter gradually died down, turning into sobs. He muttered, "Master, I must take revenge, must take revenge." Saying that, he hugged Kim Mong Hung's body and flew away as fast as the wind. He decided to bury his master on a high mountain, because he clearly understood the character of people who always liked high and deserted places. Before long, Kim Phi reached the top of the mountain. High above, the cold wind was like sharp blades, whipping painfully at my face. Unexpectedly, as soon as he set foot on the highest peak, an incomparably powerful wave of palm wind crashed straight into his chest. At this time, Kim Phi was filled with resentment and pain. He did not expect that on the top of the high mountain there would be someone lurking and suddenly attacking him. However, no matter how quickly the opponent acted, as soon as he realized the danger, he only slightly shrugged his feet. His body jumped several feet high, thus avoiding the entire blow of the palm wind. Floating in midair, Kim Phi bent down to look and saw at his feet 5 people dressed differently, their faces covered with scarves, their eyes shining like lights, enough to know that all 5 were rare experts. He silently cried out in pain, still holding his master's body tightly with both hands. If he let go now, Kim Mong Hung's body would fall to the ground, which he absolutely did not want. The mountain top was only about 10 meters wide, and was occupied by the other 5 people. If he wanted to lower his legs, he had to use strong force to force them to step back. As Kim Phi's body slowly lowered, the 5 enemies smiled faintly. The 2 men standing closest simultaneously released their palms, aiming straight at the vital points under his body. Kim Phi laughed coldly, suddenly stomped 1 foot, his body shot 5 meters out. Immediately after that, his 2 legs continuously launched 21 kicks. His feet were so fast that the other 5 men were startled and frightened. Not only did he avoid the attacks of the 2 men in front of him, but he also forced 3 more men to retreat. As soon as he touched the ground, Kim Phi turned around. His legs continued to kick straight at the nearest person. But the 5 people were all experienced players, smiling faintly while simultaneously counterattacking. The palm wind rushed like a storm, aiming straight at Kim Fi's major acupoints and attacking. Seeing this, Kim Fi was secretly frightened, knowing that continuing to fight would be unfavorable, so he shouted loudly, "Stop!" The other 5 people froze. The leader, with a short, fat body, laughed shrilly and asked, "Kid, if you have any last thoughts, please tell us quickly." Kim Fi smiled faintly and replied, "Why don't you dare let me see your true face?" The other guy laughed strangely and said coldly, "Kid, you are not qualified to look at me." Kim Fi was angry to the extreme, but his expression remained calm, his voice cold. In the past, this clan master's sword did not kill anonymous people. "Please report your name." At that time, he was still holding Kim Mong Hung's body tightly. Another masked man chuckled and interjected, "This day next year will be the first anniversary of your death." Kim Fi raised his head and laughed loudly. The laughter was as cold as ice, making all 5 people secretly shiver. After laughing, he growled, "Huh! Do you want to fight to the death?" The masked man nodded, "Yes. Tonight you will bury your body in this grave." He shouted a loud signal. Immediately 5 lines of cold light flashed, surrounding Kim Fi, murderous aura billowing. After more than 20 rounds, Kim Fi performed all his great skills but still could not break the siege of 5 strangers, because his master's body was still entangled in both hands. Right at the critical moment, Kim Fi suddenly screamed like thunder. A beam of blue light rushed straight towards the masked man. He howled and quickly dodged more than a foot away, avoiding the terrifying sword shadow. Taking that opportunity, Kim Fi shot up like smoke, then plunged straight into the river at the foot of the mountain. As soon as his body touched the water, he immediately sank without a trace. The masked man rushed to the edge of the mountain and looked down, laughing. "He's dead." Having finished speaking, the group quickly withdrew, disappearing into the dark night. When he emerged from the water, Kim Fi raised his head and looked around to realize that he had fallen into a dead end. Surrounded by steep rocky mountains, this lagoon is like a giant natural well. All 4 sides of the cliff are covered with moss and grass. He raised his head and looked up, only seeing a small, narrow piece of sky, and the surrounding cliffs were all over 60 feet high, as vertical as walls, basically impossible to climb. Kim Fi was extremely discouraged, sighed softly, looked at his master's body lying next to him, then sat cross-legged to control his breathing, using his energy to restore his internal strength. Gradually, the true energy in his body circulated smoothly. I don't know how much time has passed. White mist rose from the top of his head. His nostrils spewed out 2 streams of white air like jade pillars, sometimes long and sometimes short, sometimes flowing down to his chest. Another moment, Kim Fi opened her eyes, her gaze flashing with 2 terrifying rays of light. He raised his head and saw that the sky was already bright, and thought to himself, "I haven't seen me return all night. The bitch Ba Bang brothers must be very worried. But they don't know that their Bang master is stuck here." Thinking about the situation outside, his heart was as hot as fire. He looked everywhere for a way out, but for a long time he only saw despair. While feeling depressed, Kim Fi suddenly smiled, because he discovered that about 8 meters away from where he was sitting, there was a small cave entrance, covered by weeds and rattan thorns. It's unknown whether that cave will help escape this great place, but in a deadlock situation, seeing a way out cannot be ignored. He carefully hugged his master's body, bounced his feet, and his body jumped up to the cave entrance. The cave entrance is high above the water, so the inside is very dry. Kim Fi pushed aside the thorny grass and slowly walked in, thinking to himself, "This place is no longer a perfect place." But just 10 steps deeper, he was immediately disappointed. It turned out that although the cave was quite wide, it was not deep, because Kim Fi had seen the bottom. He sighed lazily, sat down next to Kim Mong Hung's body, and silently prayed, "Holy Master, please bless the disciple to soon discover his family background and avenge his master." Many old memories came rushing back. He clearly understood that he could not die, because there were still many big things waiting to be resolved. But for now, how can we escape this desperate place? Kim Fi tried to calm down, sending true energy circulating throughout his body. After a while of calming down, my internal energy surged and my spirit was uplifted. In the end, he decided to bury his master right in the cave. After the burial, he prayed for a long time and then began to practice. Suddenly a thought flashed, he whispered. When I was at Lang Hukak, that senior once gave me a pearl, inside it seemed like a hidden palm technique. Why don't I take it out and see? Maybe I'll learn an invincible technique. Thinking so, he took out the pearl and looked at it. Inside the pearl is a dim cloud. In the middle of the cloud there seems to be a dragon winding. Kim Fi looked intently and remained motionless for a long time. A moment later, he happily stood up and practiced each move in turn. Then he put the pearl in his pocket, joyfully walked to Kim Mong Hung's grave, bowed his head and bowed. Master, Fi Ni must leave this place. Master, please rest in peace here. Fi Ni is determined to avenge you. Having finished speaking, he walked out of the cave entrance, raised his head and looked up at the cliff for a moment, then bounced his feet vigorously. When his flying momentum was about to run out, he turned around in midair, his palms crossed, the palm wind swirled, pressure poured out in all four directions. His body was like a dragon flying among the clouds, and in the blink of an eye he reached the top of the mountain. Kim Fi stood on the top of the mountain, sighed and muttered, "Although the martial art we just learned is not necessarily enough to defeat a strong enemy, we still have to give it a name." He pondered for a moment, then nodded. "That's right. Long Van Nine Consciousnesses. Just call it Long Van Nine Consciousness." Looking around, his emotions overflowing, Kim Fi raised his face to the sky and let out a long howl to vent his anger. Suddenly, he saw at the foot of the mountain, on the side of a plain, a small figure walking. Looking closely, that figure vaguely resembles Lai Hong. He snorted coldly, thinking to himself, "What are you still doing there? Are you waiting for me to cut you?" Huh! As he thought, he rushed down to the plain. The closer he got, the more clearly he saw that it was indeed Lai Hong. Before long, Kim Fi was standing in front of her. Lai Hong only saw a gray shadow shooting straight down from the top of the mountain, as fast as an arrow leaving the bowstring. In the blink of an eye, that person was standing in front of her. It was Kim Fi, the person she missed day and night. She was overjoyed, her face radiant like a blooming flower, looking at him in shock, speechless. Seeing that appearance, Kim Fi's heart beat strongly. He thought to himself, "She is truly a beautiful and affectionate young woman." His face therefore softened a lot. Lai Hong sadly asked, "Mr. Deng, is he still healthy?" Kim Fi smiled and replied, "Still normal, thank you, ma'am." He both loved and hated her, so they both just stood quietly for a long time. Only then did Lai Hong speak first, his voice hesitant. "Young master, did come here because of the master?" Kim Fi coldly replied, "I don't dare bother you to ask about this matter." Lai Hong bowed his head, his resentment clearly visible. A moment later, she gritted her teeth, pursed her lips, and softly asked, "So where are you planning to go now?" "Tien Muk Mountain. Can I come with you?" "Why?" Lai Hong looked up at him, her cheeks red, and shyly replied, Because. I also want to go to Tien Muk Mountain." Hearing that, Kim Fi shivered slightly. He knew Lai Hong loved him dearly, but he did not want to accept that feeling. Even though there was love in his heart, he still tried to deny it. The two of them stood silently again as before. Lai Hong said, "If you don't want to go with me, then I'll go alone." Kim Fi coldly humphed and was about to mock her a few times when he suddenly heard a very soft noise behind him. He quickly turned around to look back and saw a handsome young man, lavishly dressed, in a light yellow shirt, and a hand fan of the same color. "That person is the son Hong Kai Vu." He smiled, walked closer to Lai Hong, and coldly asked, "Sister Hong, why did you leave me like that?" It seemed like he didn't care about Kim Fi at all. He didn't even bother to look at him. Lai Hong looked at Kim Fi for a moment, then suddenly his murderous aura rose, his face darkened, and he coldly replied, Because I hate you. Young Master De Sun laughed, took 2 more steps, his voice filled with coldness. So you made an appointment with this guy here to secretly meet, right? He said as he glanced sideways at Kim Fi. Kim Fi was already angry, but now seeing young Master De Sun acting arrogant, he felt even more unhappy. Although he refused to admit that he loved Lai Hong, jealousy suddenly arose, making him especially hate those who dared to speak disrespectfully to her. Furthermore, Hong Kai-vu publicly insulted him, so Kim Fi smiled faintly and asked again, Hong, don't you want to live anymore? Hong Kai-vu, also known as young Master De Sun, was surprised when he heard that. He quickly turned his head and stared at him for a moment, then burst out laughing shrilly. You're pretending quite well, you're really brave. But compared to this young master, it's nothing. After laughing, his face suddenly changed, his voice cold. Boy, if you leave here immediately, this young master will give you a special favor and spare your life. Hearing this, Kim Fi became even more angry and could not bear it. He only smiled faintly and replied, You're so clever at bragging. But today, the one who has to beg for his life is not me, but you. Do you understand? Hong Kai-vu stepped forward again, laughing wildly, his voice full of arrogance. So that kid, do you know who this young master is? Kim Fi contemptuously pouted. I don't have time to inquire about people like you. Young Master De Sun, being so despised, immediately became angry and shouted, If you say that, it will be difficult for you to escape death. As soon as he finished speaking, his body was as light as a dry leaf, gliding forward, waving his golden fan, suddenly hitting Kim Fi's 3 great acupuncture points. The attack is both strong and strange, with few equals in the world. Kim Fi snorted coldly, still standing still, waiting for the fan to almost touch his body before taking a step to avoid it, then swung his hand as fast as lightning to grab the opponent's right wrist. Young Master De Sun let out an "oh" sound. Unexpectedly, this kid also has a few martial arts skills. Having said that, he turned his hand away from the grasping position, swung his fan like a hurricane, continuously attacked, smiled faintly and shouted, Let's see what kind of ability you have to withstand this young master's fan. He thought to himself that if he just used this move, even if he hadn't used all his strength, it would be difficult for the opponent to avoid falling to the ground. Unexpectedly, Kim Fi let out a loud snort, his palms dancing, so fast that it made people think he had several arms at the same time. He pushed his palms hard to block the dangerous fanning position, and at the same time, his left hand struck 18 palms in a row. The move was so fast that neither the opponent nor Lai Hong had time to see his figure clearly. When young Master De Sun saw this, his expression immediately changed and he quickly shouted, Quickly report your name to this young master. Kim Fi leisurely replied, Dang Kim Fi. Hong Kai-vu changed his face slightly, then burst out laughing. Great. This young master is planning to find you. Having finished speaking, he rushed forward, his attack becoming faster and stronger than before. Kim Fi was secretly frightened and said to himself, Why is the martial arts of this young Master De Sun similar to that of Lang Hu Valley Master? While thinking, he turned around as fast as a pinwheel, using the one-line view method, gliding back and forth in the fan curtain, while continuously counterattacking with dangerous moves. After fighting for a while, young Master De Sun suddenly shouted loudly, used his internal strength to counterattack, intending to surround Kim Fi in the middle. However, even though he had put in 12 successful efforts, he still could not gain the upper hand, and fear began to arise in his heart. Because he felt that although the pressure was fierce, the fan was cold, and the attack range was vast, Kim Fi was like a stone lying in a pile of powder. Even though he was surrounded on all sides, he still stood tall and unmoved. Lai Hong stood far away, his face constantly changing. She had already drawn the silver thatched sword, held it tightly in her hand, just waiting for Kim Fi to be in danger before rushing in to help fight. Even though she stood several meters away from the battle, the hem of her dress was still fluttered by Kim Fi's palm wind. By the 50th round, Kim Fai secretly acknowledged that Desun's martial arts skills were indeed far beyond those of ordinary masters. No wonder he was so arrogant. Suddenly he had an idea and said, "Why don't I take this opportunity to try and see how strong the power of Long Van Nine form is?" Having finished thinking, Kim Fai jumped up high, his palms raised and dancing, looking like auspicious clouds curling around a flying dragon. Young Master Desun saw that the situation was extremely unfavorable, so he quickly tried his best to use his fan to defend, but the more he fought, the more he was forced to retreat. At that moment, Kim Fai's voice rang in his ears, cold as if pouring straight into his brain. "In 3 rounds, I will force you to throw away your fan." After hearing this, young Master Desun's expression changed in fright. He quickly performed his ultimate skill, flashing his fan, aiming straight at Kim Fai's chest. Kim Fai laughed loudly, suddenly sank down. His palm force was like a falling mountain, hitting straight at Hong Kai-Vu's vital point. Hong Kai-Vu quickly withdrew his fan and turned into 2 gusts of wind, hitting Kim Fai's sides. Kim Fai turned around and turned his palm into a claw. Hong Kai-Vu raised his right palm to defend. Boom! Huh! A fierce collision rang out, followed by a terrible scream. The two immediately separated in each direction. Lai Hong saw that young Master Desun's face was pale. He staggered back 5 steps before standing still, his eyes closed. He spit out a mouthful of blood. His hands were empty. She turned to Kim Fai and saw him still standing in place, his face cold, his eyes shooting out 2 streams of light, his right hand holding a golden fan. His power was overwhelming. Kim Fai slowly asked, "Is your father the master of Desun Hong Kwa Tien?" Young Master Desun panted for a long time, raised his head and looked up. With inconsolable anger in his heart, he replied, "This young master has already lost to you. What else is there to say? You want to kill or slash, just do it." Kim Fai coldly said, "If you're not afraid of Pan Kendo though bone algae soul hand, then I'll give it a try." As soon as young Master Desun heard about that method, his expression changed in horror and he quickly said, "If there's anything wrong, just ask. What is Hong Kwa Tien's relationship with you?" Young Master Desun replied briefly, "Father." Kim Fai smiled faintly, his voice full of contempt. "I thought Master Desun was some terrible character, famous everywhere." Unexpectedly, it was Hong Kwa Tien, who dared to do any evil deed. "Go back and tell your father, in half a year's time, I will go to Desun to pay my respects and wipe out the gates of this sect." Having finished speaking, he waved his hand and threw the fan back to young Master Desun. Hong Kai-Vu gritted his teeth and said, "At that time, this young master will be at Desun waiting for you." Kim Fai coldly interrupted, "I also know you no longer have any face standing in the Central Plains anymore. Go. If you let me meet again a second time, don't expect to be at peace like today." Young Master Desun was in indescribable pain. He entered the Central Plains with his unique knowledge. He thought that this time he would be invincible in the world and famous in the rivers and lakes. But he did not expect that he would be defeated and suffer humiliation. For a moment, he stood still, his soul seemed to fly away, and he could no longer clearly hear what Kim Fai said. Seeing this, Kim Fai shouted loudly, "There are as many experts as clouds in this Central Plains. What's the point in coming here for someone like you? Go away." Young Master Desun angrily glared at Kim Fai and Lai Hong, then turned and left, disappearing. Chapter 30. Reunited with the beauty. Young Master Desun had gone far away. Lai Hong stepped up and blurted out, "That person is so hateful." Hearing that, Kim Fai suddenly remembered the incident at the foot of Bokdao Mountain in Yen Sun, felt frustrated, softly humphed and coldly asked, "Doesn't the lady love him?" Lai Hong was stunned. She was inherently more intelligent than others. She only thought for a moment that she understood what he meant. Then she bowed her head and replied gloomily, "Little sister has never loved anyone before." Seeing her so sad, Kim Fai couldn't help but feel sorry for her. He just wanted to hug her and comfort her a few words. But the arrogance and confidence of a man made him hold back. just shrug his shoulders slightly and coldly say, "Not sure yet." Lai Hong quickly explained, "There's really nothing, little sister, there's nothing." So at the foot of Bogdao Mountain in Yansun, who did she go with? If you want to know, little sister, please explain clearly. Having finished speaking, she humphed, bowed her head, and slowly continued. Who told the young master to keep disguising himself so haphazardly that the little sister can no longer distinguish who is who? That meek and plaintive look made King Phi feel somewhat relieved, but he still remained calm and continued. To avoid enemies, I was forced to disguise myself like that. If the lady loves someone else, she can't use that as an excuse. King Phi's voice was noticeably softer. Lai Hong's eyes were red, tears filled, and he choked up and asked, I thought he was the reincarnation of the young master. King Phi was extremely surprised when he heard that, but still remained cold. So why don't you look closely? Lai Hong couldn't hold back any longer and quickly replied, Because I love you so much, because I. Having said that, she was speechless, her cheeks were red, she turned and ran straight into the forest. King Phi softly said oh, and quickly chased after him. In the quiet depths of the forest, I only saw Lai Hong leaning on King Phi's arms, pampering and saying, King Phi, you are so evil. King Phi's face also turned red and asked softly, Sister Hong, will you allow me to call you that? Lai Hong nodded shyly and replied in a low voice, Who said no? You deserve to be my brother. King Phi was indescribably emotional and couldn't hold back anymore. The two lips immediately blended together. His heart was beating rapidly, his blood was boiling. The first time he experienced love, he only felt indescribable happiness. Lai Hong made a soft huh sound, her body went limp, lying still in his arms. The two hugged each other tightly, gradually forgetting everything in the world, only listening to their heartbeats together. A moment later, Lai Hong asked softly, Phi big brother, from now on big brother will not leave you. King Phi replied without hesitation, Sister Hong, from now on, you are the wife of this King Phi. We will never be apart. Big brother, I love you, for a long time. Seeing King Phi suddenly start thinking, Lai Hong quickly asked, What are you thinking? Can you tell, little sister? I was thinking about what just happened. You're so bad. My beloved wife, I will never leave you. The bright moonlight shined on the two people's faces. Lai Hong shyly asked, Big brother didn't lie to you, right? King Phi raised his right hand to swear, with the moon, stars, and blue sky to testify, if I betray you then. Lai Hong quickly hugged his neck tightly, kissed him on the lips, not allowing him to continue speaking. After a while, she said softly, Who made you swear? I believe you. The two of them chatted lovingly in the forest until dawn before getting up to leave. Both of their faces were bright. Lai Hong ran his hand through his hair and asked softly, Sir, do you think my hair is messy? King Phi smiled and asked again, Or do you want your foolish brother to imitate a woman and comb your hair for you? Who said that, boss? Little sister just asked that. After speaking, she stroked her hair again and smiled. Let's go. The two people left the mountain range and headed towards Tien Muk Sun. On the way, King Phi found an unusually good white horse. Lai Hong stopped by the farmer's house to pick up 2 red horses. Then they both headed straight to Anhui. At that time, the sun had just risen and the street was bustling with people. A pair of men and women with outstanding appearances, one riding a white horse, the other riding a red horse, looking like the immortal Dong Nagnu descending to earth, leisurely entered the city. Passers-by who saw it all stopped to look at it and continuously praised it. On the side of the road, under an ancient tree, there were 3 fierce-looking Taoists sitting motionless. All 3 of them had thin bodies and had been sitting there for half a day, yet their eyes never blinked once. When King Phi and Lai Hong passed by, one of the Taoist monks squinted slightly, his eyes shooting out 2 beams of bright yellow light. The Taoist sitting on the left said in a low voice, That guy is here. As soon as the words ended, a cold laugh like a sharp arrow rang in his ears. All three immediately opened their eyes wide and watched. Kim Fai and Lai Hong were still walking, laughing and talking, leisurely entering the city. Waiting until the two people disappeared behind the city gate, the Taoist sitting on the right spoke. "This kid is not easy to deal with." The Taoist sitting in the middle coldly replied, "Wait until it's dark before calculating." The Taoist on the right chuckled softly, "That girl also looks quite beautiful." The Taoist on the left glanced at him, smiled, then all three closed their eyes. A moment later, the Taoist sitting in the middle suddenly opened his eyes and said, "Old man, you go into the city to explore first. The juniors are afraid they won't be able to do this." The Taoist on the left immediately stood up, picked up the staff placed next to him, and slowly walked into the city. As for Kim Fai and Lai Hong, after entering the city, they went straight to Phuc Lai Hotel. A soldier quickly ran out to greet him. Lai Hong quietly said to Kim Fai, "Sir, let's go to this hotel to rest." Kim Fai nodded. Both got off their horses and walked into the shop. Seeing that the two people were dressed elegantly, the Chot immediately bowed very politely. "You and your lady can rest assured, this hotel is clean, spacious, and has many delicious dishes." Kim Fai and Lai Hong handed over the horses to their husbands to lead them into the barn. Another waiter immediately led the two upstairs. The two of them chose 2 rooms next to each other. Wait for the guests to sit down, open the menu, and respectfully say, "Sir, please order." Kim Fai smiled and turned to Lai Hong. "Dear sister, just say whatever you want to eat." Lai Hong glanced at him and replied, "Big brother, choose." Kim Fai immediately told him, "If there's something delicious, make a few dishes and bring good wine here." The waiter happily nodded and left. The two of them stood by the window admiring the scenery. Suddenly Kim Fai sighed softly. Lai Hong asked in surprise. He replied, "It would be such a pleasure if all resentments could be resolved." At that time, the monk brought wine and food. Two people sat down to eat and drink. After eating, Kim Fai took Lai Hong back to his room and gently advised, "I don't know if someone will come and bother me. Dear sister, you must be careful, remember to absolutely not leave my brother's side." Lai Hong nodded yes. Kim Fai gently kissed her cheek and then returned to the room to rest. Lying down, Kim Fai remembered the people he had met on the road. Thinking over and over, he only saw the 3 old monks during the day as the most suspicious. But he still couldn't guess which sect they belonged to, thinking to himself, could it be someone from the 9 Heavens Tao Palace? But he didn't understand why the 9 Heavenly Tao Palace made enemies with him and even came to cause trouble so many times. Thinking for a long time, he decided, if anyone dares to bother, he will definitely teach them a lesson. Kim Fai sat on the bed using internal exercises to regulate her breath. In just a moment, my spirit was full again. Not long after, the drum struck the 3rd watch. Kim Fai turned down the light, rolled the blanket into a human shape and placed it on the bed, then opened the window, flew out, and glided to the roof to hide. A moment later, 3 dark shadows rushed forward as fast as ghosts, suddenly stopping in front of the hotel. Kim Fai looked and realized that they were the 3 skinny Taoists he had met during the day. As soon as they arrived, the 3 of them immediately jumped onto the roof, looked around, then quietly walked towards Kim Fai and Lai Hong's room. "The leader is the leader," he lightly signaled, then threw himself hanging under the eaves. Another guy sneaked up to Lai Hong's door. Just looking at the movements of the 3 guys was enough to see that Kim Fai's guess was right. Their martial arts had reached the upper level. They were all top experts. The remaining Taoist squatted not far from Kim Fai, his eyes roaming around. The 2 men under the eaves waved to each other, then simultaneously pushed open the window and jumped into the room. At that moment, Kim Fai used all his strength, performed the ultimate light attack, slid behind the Taoist who was guarding, and lowered his cold voice. "Friends!" The Taoist was startled and frightened, swinging his left hand back, but the weak point under his spine was hit. His whole body went numb and he fell to the ground. Kim Fai immediately grabbed his neck, gently glided out of Lai Hong's room and jumped straight inside. In the room, another Taoist stood stunned, but Lai Hong was nowhere to be seen. Kim Fai smiled faintly. As soon as the Taoist turned around, he casually released an object as shiny as electricity. But at the same time, Kim Fai threw a dark shadow straight at him. Pop! A soft sound rang out, fresh blood splashed. The black shadow still didn't stop and rushed straight at the Taoist. He saw clearly that his dart had hit his senior brother's body, not the enemy's, so he cried out in panic, "Second senior brother!" As soon as he reached out to catch it, a blurry white shadow flew as fast as lightning, spinning around his body. His whole body was paralyzed. He collapsed to the ground immediately. Kim Fai raised his hand to gently support him and put his body down. At that moment, outside the window suddenly came Lai Hong's screams. "Fai, big brother!" The cry echoed far away. Kim Fai was startled and frightened, thinking to himself, "How strange! Why did Sister Hong fall into the enemy's hands?" Without thinking too much, he turned into a puff of smoke and jumped onto the roof to search. Ahead, a black shadow was rushing like lightning toward the northwest. Chapter 31. The blue cloud sword swings wildly. Without hesitation, Kim Fai immediately used all his light attack and rushed straight to the northwest in pursuit. That black shadow was incredibly fast, leaving the city in just a moment. When Kim Fai chased after him, the distance between the two sides was only more than 10 feet. At this time, he clearly saw that the person was one of the three Taoists, and Lai Hong was unconscious, carried in his arms. Before long, the two of them entered the mountain area dozens of meters away from the citadel. Ahead appeared a ruined temple. Kim Fai quickly held his breath, used his momentum to jump into the air, passed in front of the Taoist and then landed to block the path. The Taoist smiled faintly, still aiming straight at the ruined temple and rushing in. Just as Kim Fai was about to strike down on the Taoist's head, a bright red light suddenly flashed on the roof of the temple, shooting straight towards him. Kim Fai was startled and frightened, quickly raised his palms, and continuously launched more than 10 attacks to attack that black shadow. Just hearing a bang sound, the person's body was thrown away, deeply embedded in the trunk of an ancient tree several dozen feet away. The Taoist carried Lai Hong and ran away. Unexpectedly, Kim Fai, despite being attacked by his side, still had the strength to counterattack, so he was completely caught off guard. He threw 21 kicks at once. As soon as he realized it, he was kicked in the butt. He heard a pop sound, his mouth cried out whoosh, his body was thrown 7 or 8 steps away and then rolled and fell to the ground. Lai Hong was also thrown more than a foot away. At that moment, more than 10 monks rushed out from the temple. Kim Fai rushed to Lai Hong's side, saw her whole body covered in dust, her eyes closed. His heart was extremely painful. He quickly hugged her and placed his hand on her vital point. Lai Hong softly said "oh wow" a few times, then opened his eyes. She felt her hand in Kim Fai's hand, and at the same time heard her lover's low voice say, "Dear sisters, you have to be careful." Lai Hong just woke up and looked around. Seeing Kim Fai standing next to her, she immediately jumped up, pulled her sword out of its sheath, and with her left hand brushed off the dust on her body. The scene at that time was extremely scary. In the middle of the quiet forest, occasionally a few mournful owl calls rang out, making the atmosphere even more gloomy. Around them, several Taoist monks with thin faces and fierce expressions were surrounding the two people. The Taoist monks glared at them, their pupils flashing with sparkling golden light. Kim Fai smiled faintly, clasped his hands in ceremony and asked, "What is your intention in luring Ding to come here today?" The Taoist standing in the middle, the shortest in stature, took a half step forward, smiled coldly, and replied, "These Taoists are disciples of the Nine Heavens Tao Palace, serving orders to invite you to meet the Patriarch." Kim Fai smirked. "If you use your power to force someone like that, I may not be willing to let you go." The old Taoist remained cold, his voice without any emotion. "Whether you agree or not, today there are only 2 ways. One is to go, the other is to die." Anger welled up in Kim Fai's heart, but he only smiled faintly and said, "Anyone who is confident enough to have enough skills can just come out here and force this subordinate." Having finished speaking, he spread true energy throughout his body, silently preparing to meet the enemy. He knew that the dozen people in front of him were not ordinary people, and if they really fought, they had to be very careful. On the outside he still looked leisurely, but in his heart he was carefully observing every move. The surrounding range of more than 10 meters is within the opponent's attack range. Lai Hong's face revealed murderous intent and shouted loudly, "Those Taoist thieves! If you have the guts, then attack with integrity, why bother secretly stealing?" The monk standing in the middle replied in a deep voice, "Without letting you experience a little pain, you won't know how powerful the 9 heavenly Tao Palace is." As soon as he finished speaking, he pulled out his long sword. Immediately, more than 10 remaining Taoists simultaneously drew their swords. Kim Fai gently told Lai Hong, "Dear sister, don't leave foolish brother, use your own hands to work, remember." As soon as his words ended, the Taoist let out a blood-curdling howl, brandished his sword and rushed forward. Almost at the same time, from all 4 directions, several swords of the Taoist monks simultaneously slashed. Lai Hong shouted softly, immediately raised his sword and rushed forward to block. The silver sword in her hand turned into hundreds of thousands of streaks of silver light, rolling into the opponent's sword light circle. Kim Fai simultaneously raised his 2 palms to counterattack. The palm wind rolled up like an invisible wall, loudly pressing straight towards the group of Taoists. The battle immediately became extremely fierce. The sword images of the Taoist monks were like countless streams of cold light shooting incessantly. Kim Fai's body style is as light as a ghost's. His figure suddenly disappears, gliding through the small gaps between the sword light. Each time he strikes is extremely dangerous. Lai Hong was surrounded by 3 Taoist monks, and had no choice but to risk his life and fight. Her non-fetch sword both blocked the enemy's attack and suddenly counterattacked. Every move was sharp. The battle became more and more fierce. Kim Fai's body turned faster and faster, his 2 palms continuously attacked the surrounding area, but he still did not forget to protect Lai Hong with a glance. The more the Taoists of the 9 Heavens Palace fought, the more frightened they became. They only feel that a ghost is always hovering around them. No matter how powerful their swordsmanship is, they cannot touch the opponent's body. They even suspected that the person in front of them was not the weak rider from the beginning, but rather a ghostly ghost. It was clear that the tip of the sword was piercing, but looking closely, it just seemed to be stabbing into endless space. Gradually, before the eyes of the monks, Kim Fai's figure appeared everywhere, from 1 to 2, from 2 to 4, and finally everywhere. His figure flickered like a dream. As for Kim Fai, he was secretly scared. He didn't know what class this group of people in the 9 Heavenly Tao Palace belonged to, but just looking at their skills, they were far superior to ordinary gangsters. If they are only second or third rate, then the strength of the 9 Heavenly Tao Palace truly cannot be underestimated. Suddenly, a terrible howl rang out and blood sprayed out. Before the group of monks could recover, the screams suddenly rose again, accompanied by the sound of a body falling down, blood splashing like rain. On Lai Hong's side, thanks to the situation tilting towards Kim Fai, she also quickly gained the upper hand. In just a blink of an eye, she immediately killed 2 Taoists. Just as the group of Taoists were being defeated, 10 silhouettes rushed forward from afar. All of them were Taoists. Different from before, these guys dressed neatly and acted leisurely, looking like leisurely rich men. When they arrived, they just stood still, squinting, observing Kim Fai's every move. Immediately after that, 2 more Taoists died at the hands of Kim Fai, and the one who was fighting with Lai Hong appeared exhausted, only able to defend, unable to counterattack. Suddenly 2 elegantly dressed Taoists gently jumped into the battle circle. A man spoke in a strange voice and asked, "That Deng family, have you killed enough?" At the same time, both raised 4 palms to strike straight at Kim Fai's double palms. Just heard a loud boom sound, sand and dust flew, and the surrounding plants collapsed. The 2 Taoists glided lightly out over the staff, looking leisurely as if gliding on the wind. On the contrary, Kim Fai only felt dizzy, his blood rushing, he quickly took 2 steps back before standing firm. He thought in horror, I didn't expect that the opponent would attack so lightly and yet I would receive internal injuries. It seems that tonight there will be more harm than good. But those 2 Taoists were originally the top masters of the 9 heavenly Tao Palace. The 2 of them joined forces, expended all their strength, but were still shaken back more than a foot, their heads were dizzy, and they could hardly bear it. Therefore, it is definitely not an easy task for those newly appearing Taoists to defeat King Fai. Those 2 Taoists silently used their energy to heal their wounds, while the other 8 people were terrified. At that time, both sides temporarily stopped. Lai Hong was sweating profusely, his hair was messy, he was panting and walked over to ask King Fai, "Is Big Brother injured?" King Fai replied softly, "No, my dear sister, rest assured." Even so, Lai Hong was still extremely worried. Under the moonlight, she saw his pale face, gritting his teeth and pursing his lips to force a smile. Her heart was extremely painful, so she said, "Big Brother, please rest for a moment, let little sister fend them off." Kim Fai forced a smile and used voice transmission to secretly reply, "No need. Dear sisters, you must understand that their attack is very strong. Quickly use your attack to regulate your energy, and prepare to respond." Lai Hong did not say more, silently adjusted his true energy, determined to risk his life against the enemy. All around was suddenly quiet, with only a few soft breathing sounds remaining. The monks of the 9 heavenly Tao Palace seemed to be waiting for someone, just glaring at King Fai, not saying a word. A moment later, a long howl sounded from afar. Immediately, one of the 10 elegantly dressed Taoists who had just arrived also roared in response. At the same time, he quickly walked closer to King Fai, raised his palm and aimed straight at the major acupuncture points on his body. Even though he was on guard, King Fai still did not expect the opponent to coordinate with that howl and attack so suddenly. He was startled and frightened, quickly stepped aside, raised his left palm and pushed out a powerful wind to shield both himself and Lai Hong. The 2 blasts of force collided violently, causing both of them to take a few steps back. Right after that, 2 lightning-fast figures rushed in front of King Fai, simultaneously raising their palms to attack both him and Lai Hong. Lai Hong had the precious sword in his hand, so he immediately swung the sword around like a shield, protecting his whole body. At that moment, another thin and tall Taoist appeared in the arena. As soon as he appeared, he smiled coldly and said, "Go ahead. We must capture him alive, because the Patriarch wants to disembowel him himself." The group of Taoists showed great fear of the old Taoist. They responded in unison and then rushed forward, surrounding King Fai and Lai Hong. Seeing that, King Fai was startled. The opponent's force was strong, pressing in all directions, making him clearly feel the heavy pressure. He shouted loudly, mobilized Long Feng's energy, and pushed it out. Around his body, supple streams of force immediately rolled up, pressing the force of his palms in all 4 directions. After a few resounding boom sounds, the ground sank into a deep hole, and the pressure around King Fai's body also lightened. He immediately pulled out the Kim Hut divine sword. A flash of light blinded everyone, as if a sun had just appeared in the arena. At the same time, Lai Hong also screamed, waving his silver sword. The 2 swords merged together, the sword light of gold and silver interwoven, like hundreds of thousands of gold and silver dragons rolling around the group of Taoists. Before long, the miserable screams rang out endlessly, raining blood everywhere. One by one, the Taoists collapsed, some with broken arms, some with broken legs, some with swords pierced through their bodies, lying everywhere. The old Taoist standing next to him smiled faintly, clearly seeing the situation on both sides. He immediately drew his sword and rushed straight to attack. King Fai saw the sword light flashing, cold air penetrating his bones, so he waved his divine sword to greet him. At that moment, he heard Lai Hong shout loudly, "Really good thief." While shouting, she hit hard to the left. King Fai saw this and shouted loudly, "Sister Hong, don't go far." The 2 sword lights collided, making a shrill kung sound. Kim Fai immediately took 3 steps back, glanced at the Kim Huk divine sword, and saw that the blade was still intact and undamaged. At that moment, 3 sword lights stabbed him from behind and in front of his stomach. Kim Fai smiled faintly and waved his magic sword to brush it away. The battle immediately became as fierce as before. The 4 old Taoists worked closely together, supporting the front and supporting the rear. At that moment, at the temple door suddenly appeared a masked person, tall and muscular, standing silently watching. No one paid attention to him, and he did not interfere at all, just folded his arms and observed. Kim Fai felt the external force pressing down on him like a mountain, seemingly unable to resist, but his expression remained calm and his sword stance was not at all chaotic. His left hand also did not stay still, occasionally suddenly launching a blow to attack those standing nearby. He glanced at Lai Hong and saw her surrounded by 4 Taoist monks. She gritted her teeth and endured, sweat pouring down like rain. The sword light was only enough to protect within a 3-meter range around her body. Suddenly, a Taoist stabbed her in the face. Lai Hong immediately performed the Tam Nam Sun stance, slashing downwards. Unexpectedly, the Taoist turned his sword into 6 silver flowers that covered her, and at the same time, 3 other swords from 3 different directions stabbed at the same time. If she is not exhausted, she can also use the Hug Nan Dong Tang position to dodge and counterattack. But at this time, she did not have enough strength to deal with 4 attacks at the same time. Lai Hong was frightened, and before he could think of a way to respond, he heard a clink sound, causing the sword to slip out of his hand. She cried out silently, "Big brother!" Before the screams ended, her whole body went numb and she fell to the ground. The 4 Taoists simultaneously raised their heads to look at the 5 people standing in front of the temple door. Then together they carried Lai Hong in front of the masked Taoist. I only saw him nod slightly and point his hand towards Kim Fai. The 4 Taoists immediately respectfully accepted their orders, turned around and rushed forward, surrounding Kim Fai. Kim Fai, who was fighting with several Taoist monks, was quite tired, now worried about Lai Hong, and then 4 more enemies rushed in to surround him. Therefore, his sword position gradually became disordered, the range of defense became increasingly narrowed, and the sweat on his forehead fell like rain. The masked Taoist standing next to him still smiled faintly and coldly ordered, "Catch it!" 4 Taoists standing near him immediately drew their swords and rushed forward to continue the siege. At this moment, Kim Fai's attack speed slowed down, and despair appeared in his heart. But thinking about the family enemies, the monk's resentment and the heavy responsibility of serving the gang that was weighing heavily on his shoulders, he told himself that he absolutely could not die here. At that moment, a strange power suddenly surged from his body. He simultaneously performed the body technique Not Twin Fu and the strong energy of Long Fong. Blue light suddenly flashed, Bitch Van's sword was unsheathed. He used all his strength in a desperate situation, hoping to reverse his defeat and find a way out. But the enemy is too numerous, and they are all powerful experts. Can he easily let him leave the siege? Chapter 32. The Mighty War Force. Kim Fai felt waves of external sword force pressing against him. In that situation, he had no choice but to defend himself. He performed the Not Twin Fu body technique, holding Kim Huk and Bitch Van's swords in both hands, dancing continuously. The feeling right now is like standing on a small boat in the middle of a rough sea, swaying before fierce waves and winds. After fighting hundreds of moves, he had more defense than offense, sweat poured down his forehead, and his movements gradually slowed down. A masked Taoist with a muscular body stood next to him and laughed coldly. "Dang Kim Fai, I didn't expect that today you would also fail." Those words made Kim Fai's heart ache. However, he caught a glimpse of that voice, which was extremely familiar. Circumstances did not allow him to think further. His anger flared up. He swung his sword even more fiercely. Ouch! A pitiful cry rang out. One enemy had his head cut off and his body was thrown far away. The remaining guys shouted loudly at the same time, rushing in to attack even more, but no one showed any signs of fear. Kim Fi used all his strength to resist, silently spreading his true strength throughout his body to restore his strength. At this moment, all the Taoists present rushed to surround him, making the opponent's sword display even more ferocious. After adjusting the air, Kim Fi suddenly shook his wrists vigorously, emitting a long howl like a dragon's roar. His body rotated in accordance with the two streams of sword light, Kim and Bitch, emitting resounding ding, gong, gung sounds. In just a moment, amid the sound of metal shaking, spots of cold light shot out in all directions. 4 or 5 swords of the monks were broken by him. Immediately after that, 2 more miserable screams rang out. 2 more Taoists died at Kim Fi's hands. Their limbs were broken, their bodies were thrown far away. Kim Fi used all his strength to perform the not twin few body technique, his body like the wind, running around the arena. The 2 swords in his hands simultaneously counterattacked. Their power was fierce and unpredictable. In just a moment, he regained the upper hand. The 2 sides continued to fight, while Lai Hong lay motionless in front of the old Taoist. Behind the masked Taoist, 2 silver-haired old Taoists, carrying a pair of ancient swords on their backs, stood silently observing. Seeing that Kim Fi had reversed the situation, the masked Taoist immediately turned to the 2 silver-haired old Taoists and ordered, "Go ahead. Whether we live or die, we must defeat him." The 2 old monks respectfully replied, "Yes." Both drew their swords and jumped into the battle circle at the same time, fighting straight towards Kim Fi. At that time, Kim Fi was performing the Kim Long Tho Lo stance. His right hand was followed by Na Bitch Tu Tui, while repelling the sword light in all directions. He suddenly felt a heavy pressure skyrocketing. 2 streams of sword light as fast as lightning immediately surrounded him, continuously aiming at the vital points and stabbing. He had exhausted all his strength. Even if he wanted to take advantage of it, there was no time. Kim Fi smiled faintly. The divine sword Kim Huk suddenly changed its move, from Kim Long Tho Lo to Tien Jang Kim Tui. It was as if thousands of golden rays of light suddenly fell from the sky, rushing straight into the group of Taoists. Just heard a loud kong sound, swords broke, people flew, and the battle immediately became chaotic. Everyone stopped at once, stood still, and surrounded Kim Fi, their eyes staring intently at him. All around was as quiet as a sheet of paper. Even the sound of a pin dropping to the ground could be heard clearly. The masked Taoist suddenly smiled faintly and gently raised his hand to press down. Seeing that, Kim Fi let out a loud scream, suddenly took a few steps back, then flew straight towards the masked Taoist. Unexpectedly, although Kim Fi's movements were as fast as lightning, the surrounding monks were no slower. As soon as his body jumped up, more than 10 streams of cold light merged into a large sword curtain, pressing down hard on his head. Wanting to save Lai Hong from danger, Kim Fi completely did not think about his own safety and immediately used all his strength. He let out a loud scream, his body twisted like a snake. 2 sharp streams of cold energy shot straight into the opponent's sword screen. Immediately, I heard kong 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 kong. Ringing continuously, the figure was blown away, and at the same time 2 rays of light, one yellow and one blue, shot straight into the sky. The masked Taoist with a muscular body laughed hysterically, immediately waved his 2 palms and rushed into the battle, directly attacking Kim Fi, shouting loudly, "Escape!" Having finished speaking, he turned around and tried to bend down to pick up Lai Hong, who was lying on the ground. At that moment, from the roof of the temple, a hoarse voice shouted loudly, "You son of a bitch, I'm here." A figure brandished 2 umbrellas, howling horrifying sounds from his mouth, and slashed straight at the masked Taoist's head. The masked Taoist let out an "oh" sound and raised his left hand to block the sudden attack. Just heard a loud boom sound and a figure fell to the ground. That person is Phuc Ho Vidra Layon. As soon as he touched the ground, Loyon shouted loudly, "Don't worry, boss, Loyon has arrived." Having finished speaking, he swung his 2 clubs like a whirlwind, aiming straight at the masked Taoist and beating him to death. Immediately after that, around the ruined temple, from far and near, the howls of the Lang rang out continuously, sometimes fast and sometimes slow, as if they had surrounded this whole area. The masked Taoist saw this, his face changed, and he secretly cried out in his heart, "Not good! People from Bitch Ba Bang have arrived." Thinking so, he immediately shouted loudly, "Retreat! Det Loi, YCUI Soang Om Gang Lai Hong, Tung Min Nai Vot Lin, Ming Van Gong Jong, Dang Kim Phi. On QTN Mountain, I will be at QTN Dao Palace waiting for you to come and teach me." As soon as he finished speaking, he rushed away. The Taoist subordinates were also about to retreat when two cold laughter rang out in the nearby forest. Almost at the same time, a light flashed like lightning and struck straight towards the masked Taoist, while another figure reached out to grab Lai Hong. The masked Taoist laughed shrilly, his body suddenly turned around in midair, his left hand raised Lai Hong as a shield. The incoming blade's light forced the opponent to withdraw his attack, allowing him to retreat close to the edge of the forest. It turned out that the two people who suddenly took action were Lao Tien and Long Dain. Lao Tien saw the opponent using Lai Hong as a shield. He was extremely angry and shouted, "Shameless thing!" His body circled in midair and continued to shout, "Taoist, where are you running to?" While shouting, he chased after him, constantly attacking the masked Taoist. The masked Taoist laughed in a strange voice and coldly replied, "Come back." As soon as he finished speaking, he clasped his hands together and pushed hard. Immediately a gust of wind rushed straight into Lao Tien. Although he was startled and frightened, Lao Tien's nature was stubborn. Even if there was a mountain of knives or a cauldron of oil in front of him, he would never back down. So he let out a strange roar, swung his knife and slashed straight at the opponent's palms, and at the same time raised his left palm and struck out, shouting loudly, "I don't know who has to leave." Bang! A sound rang out. Lao Tien was pushed back in midair by the enemy's wind blow, somersaulted around and vomited out a mouthful of blood. But as soon as he touched the ground, he immediately rushed back. At that time, the Taoists of the Nine Heavenly Dao Palace hid one by one into the deep forest. Kim Phi immediately spoke up to stop him. "No need to chase anymore." Long Dain snatched Lai Hong, brought him before Kim Phi, bowed and bowed. "Bang master, she." Kim Phi saw that Lai Hong was unconscious, so he frowned and replied, "I'm afraid she was hit by a very strange palm wind." As he spoke, he checked her pulse, and sure enough, he found it unusual, seemingly mixed with poison. At that moment, the sound of horse hooves rang out in all directions. Bitch Ba Bang's disciples followed the wolf beast's trail to find it. In just a moment, everyone gathered in front of the ruined ancient temple. Moi nuoi thay bang chu dung du voi vi mat niam gi, ling voi vang soang angwa, dung yen cho len. Kim Phi checked Lai Hong's pulse for a long time, then coldly snorted and said angrily, "Huh! That guy's tricks are truly cruel." Having finished speaking, he reached into his pocket, took out a small bottle of pills, took one pill and put it in Lai Hong's mouth. Lao Tien and the others were not proficient in medical techniques, so they quickly asked, "Boss Bang, what to do now?" Kim Phi coldly snorted and replied, "If you give me 2 months to find enough medicinal herbs to prepare this type of poison, I can definitely cure it." Lao Tien asked impatiently, "So what do you know now?" Kim Phi said in a deep voice, "This poison takes 3 days to appear. But just now I gave her a special elixir made by my clan, which can temporarily block the toxicity and prevent it from breaking out." Long Dain immediately interjected. "No wonder when he retreated, he said something like that, probably guessing that we would find him." Gong Pham said loudly, "It's better if we attack his lair directly, then let's move on." At that moment, 5 knights also rode their horses and responded in unison, "Yes. We should attack the 9 Palaces mountain and force them to hand over the antidote." Kim Phi nodded. "Great. That's the only way." So the whole group immediately got on their horses and headed straight towards Qcum Mountain. One day later, everyone left the mountains, entered the city, and found a hotel to rest. Kim Phi told Long Dain, "You seek to buy a splendid carriage, with a sturdy body and a soft bed inside. The boss believes that Sister Hong definitely needs a good rest." Long Dain agreed and immediately left. Kim Fai stood silently in front of Lai Hong's bed, his heart heavy. She closed her eyes tightly, breathing fast and short. He muttered softly, "Sister Hong, don't worry, stupid brother will definitely find medicine to save you." Having said that, he looked at that lovely, motionless face. She still lay still, seemingly not hearing his words. Thinking of her serious poison injury, and calculating the distance to Kukung Mountain, although not far, it would still take several days. If this trip could not overcome the opponent and could not get the antidote, then not only would it be in vain but her life would be difficult to preserve. That thought made Kim Fai even more restless. He crossed his arms and walked back and forth in the room, muttering, "There are many experts in the 9 Heavenly Dao Palace, I have seen this clearly. Although we have many highly skilled martial artists on this trip, if they fight to the death, our loss will certainly not be small. Moreover, I am not familiar with the terrain, so I am at a disadvantage before and after." Thinking back and forth, he finally made up his mind and came up with a plan. Kim Fai clapped her hands. Bien Ho immediately ran over and respectfully asked, "Master, do you have anything to tell me?" Kim Fai says, "Tell everyone to have dinner at the hotel tonight, and make it clear that I have something to discuss with everyone." Bien Ho bowed and replied, "Yes." Then he went back out, gave instructions to the young man, and immediately went to inform everyone. Kim Fai had just rested for a moment when Long Dain came in and said he had bought a carriage and everything was ready. Right after that, Tuni also came in to say that the rice and water were already set up in a small room. He immediately went to that room, and as soon as he entered, he saw Bak Kat and Quan Thiat, 5 knights and others, a total of 11 people, all present. Seeing that Kim Fai had just entered, everyone immediately stood up and respectfully said in unison, "Hello, boss." Kim Fai smiled, waved his hand and said, "Please take your seats." Everyone sat down one by one. Kim Fai raised his wine cup and raised his voice, "Please." Everyone drank their cups. Waiting for everyone to put down their cups, Kim Fai turned to ask Gong Pham, "Has the surrounding area been strictly sealed off?" Gong Pham immediately replied, "All 4 sides of this room are empty, all guarded by my brothers. There are absolutely no loopholes." Kim Fai nodded and smiled lightly. "Very good." He coughed softly and then continued, "Do you know why we keep everyone here?" Everyone looked at each other, silent, and did not answer. Kim Fai slowly continued, "On this trip to Kukung Mountain, in terms of weather and terrain, we are both at a disadvantage." Having said that, he rolled his eyes around, then lowered his voice. "Another extremely important point, our time is very urgent." Long Dain quickly asked, "Why is that?" Kim Fai frowned and replied, "Miss Lai has been poisoned. It must be cured within 10 days, otherwise her life will be in danger." Bak Kat and Quan immediately interjected, "If so, why don't we come up with a neat attack plan so that when we get there, we can attack Qtn Dao Palace once we get there?" Kim Fai nodded and replied, "That's why I invited you here to dine." Loyan loudly suggested, "According to the original, just attack straight, kill them so they can't react in time." At that time, are you still afraid that they won't deliver the antidote? Lao Tien laughed heartily and continued, "The original president also approved that way." Long Dain immediately protested, "According to the original intention, doing so is not okay." Kim Fai looked over and asked, "Hero Long, what do you mean?" Long Dain replied in a deep voice, "The people of the 9 Heavenly Dao Palace are not ordinary people. If you risk your life in battle to the death, even if you kill them, you may not be able to get the antidote." Kim Fai looked around at everyone and slowly asked, "So in your opinion, how should we act?" Bak Kat and Quan continued, "According to our original nature, this time we have 2 purposes. First, get the medicine to rescue Miss Lai. Second, defeat the 9 Heavenly Dao Palace, clarify why they are aggressive towards our clan, and then consider a long-term deal." Gong Pham and Long Dain immediately agreed. Bak Dat Fong also coldly said, "The sins of the 9 Heavenly Dao Palace cannot be tolerated, they must be eliminated." Lao Tien and the 5 knights responded in unison, "Yes. That's right." Bokkat and Quan continued. Therefore, we should divide our troops into 2 lines. The first line sneaked in to grab the antidote, then turned around and joined the second line to attack the Nine Heavens Palace from the front, wiping out the Taoists there. He paused for a moment, then continued. This strategy has 2 advantages. First, it is certain to get the antidote. Second, the 2 armies rescue each other from time to time, without fear of the enemy's cunning tricks. Long Dain laughed loudly. Very good plan, I completely agree. Bok Dat Fong also excitedly said. Very reasonable. Thus, it will be difficult for the opponent not to submit. The Golden Knight stood up and said in a deep voice, the time is urgent, all decisions must be made tonight, then action must be taken immediately. Only then will we be able to deal with the enemy. Kim Fai nodded, smiled, and replied. The Seat also agreed. Lao Tien and Loyan said at the same time, please let me fight my first battle and win. Kim Fai smiled lightly and ordered. Tien Sat, Dat Fong, and Long Dain followed this Seat 1 step ahead. The remaining people protect Lai Hong, led by Loyan. Lao Tien widened his eyes and asked loudly, Boss, shouldn't I be 1 step ahead? Kim Fai calmly replied. Old man Lao followed behind and headed straight for the main door. Isn't that more refreshing than sneaking around? Lao Tien immediately exclaimed. No. Are not. I'm also very talented at capturing enemies. That statement made everyone laugh loudly. The atmosphere suddenly became lighter, then everyone happily ate and drank until the party ended, then took turns returning to rest. That night passed peacefully. Early the next morning, in front of the hotel door, there was a splendid carriage, pulled by 8 white horses, waiting. Kim Fai, Dat Fong, Tien Sat and Long Dain took advantage of the foggy sky and spurred their horses to ride like the wind, followed by a strong team of men and horses, moving straight towards Kukung Mountain. Chapter 33. Decided to enter the tiger's den. The sky was dark, night fell and covered everywhere. Under the cold moonlight, Kukung Mountain looks like a fierce beast lying in the dark, exuding a terrifying horror. Nam Kien Phi de Lin Toi Deo, Dung Lai Chok Lat Roy Teep Tuc Tien Salveo Mondem. The second time, dark shadows appeared on the top of the mountain. Thanks to the moonlight, it was clear that the night walkers were all dressed in white. That was Kim Phi, who led Bokkat and Quan, Bok Dat Fong, Long Dain and Gong Pham, to secretly go to Q Tien Dao Palace on Kukung Mountain to steal the antidote. Kim Phi and everyone glanced around, then raised their hands to point to a towering mountain. Immediately after that, the whole group used light weapons and rushed straight towards that mountain. Before long, 5 people set foot on the summit. The mountain towers high into the sky, clouds swirl around. Kim Phi and 4 people stood on the top. The mountain wind blew their clothes fluttering. In the mist ahead, he caught a glimpse of a massive architectural building looming. Bokkat and Quan raised his hand and pointed in that direction, speaking loudly. Their main Dao Palace is there. Kim Phi nodded, pondered for a moment and then said, It is indeed the 9 Heavens Dao Palace, but the terrain is too dangerous. I am afraid this attempt will be difficult to succeed. Long Dain continued. We just keep moving forward quietly, surveying the situation and finding ways to respond. Bokkat and Quan also agreed. Yes, get there then let's keep thinking. Kim Phi nodded slightly and waved his hand to signal. The 5 people immediately turned into 5 ghosts, silently rushing towards the mountain peak in front of them. The top of that mountain is extremely steep and dangerous. There is only one way to go up and down, and the other 3 sides are all straight cliffs, so smooth that even birds can hardly fly over. However, Kim Phi and 4 people were all great experts in martial arts, so those cliffs could not stop them. At this time, strict defense had been arranged in the 9 Heavenly Dao Palace. Underground watchtowers were scattered everywhere, yet the entire palace was pitch black, not a single light was lit. As soon as the 5 people arrived, they heard a whisper echoing. Since the new governor took office until now, there have been many troubles in the palace, and there has always been tension. Another voice replied, it is said that the new governor has an extremely powerful enemy. Recently the two sides fought a match. We seemed to lose, but the opponent wasn't much better. Oh, is that true? Of course it's true. When did you dare lie to me? How did the old man know about that? Big brother doesn't need to ask too much. Just know that what I say is not wrong. Another guy suddenly asked in a low voice, hey old man Tran, why did no one see him when he returned? Maybe something happened. Otherwise, with the strictness of the new governor, why don't you go out and look at your work for several days in a row? At that moment, a cold voice suddenly rang out right next to the two men. Where is your master? Immediately after that, two sounds of ha-ha were heard. Then that cold voice continued, do you dare toy with the old man? If you know what to do, quickly say, where is your lord? The space was silent for a moment, then a cold voice rang out again. You say you don't know, right? Don't know. Don't know. Huh, huh. Immediately afterwards, there was the sound of a body falling to the ground. Apparently someone lost his life. That cold voice rang out again. And you, do you know? Don't talk nonsense. I know. Where? Over there. Nonsense. The old man also knew he was there, but which room and which floor was it? If you're smart, speak quickly. Yes, upstairs. Is it the building behind the temple? Yes. Okay, you lie down and rest for a while. Having finished speaking, several dark shadows quietly glided behind the Mandarin. At that moment, a low shout rang out. Who is there? I'm here. The person who had just finished answering the words I am here immediately flew closer to the person who had just asked. The other person spoke again. Who are you? It's your father. What? The other person barely had time to utter a sound before he collapsed to the ground. Immediately afterwards, a lightning-fast figure rushed straight into the temple. In the darkness, a man brandishing a sword jumped out and shouted, who is there? Patrol here. Patrol? Right. What kind of patrol would go back into the temple like that? I came back to check on you. Who are you? Tell the truth. As soon as the other person finished speaking, before the knife could even be lowered, the other person rushed forward. Before he could make a sound, he collapsed. A stream of black smoke immediately swept into the corner of the house and disappeared. In a dark corner, a big man lies motionless, next to a sword. At that time, Qtn Dao Palace was still unaware of any enemies invading. In the darkness, a soft voice rang out. Second brother, I feel like something bad is going to happen tonight. It's very possible that someone has sneaked into the temple. Another voice replied softly, why do you suddenly feel like this? Just now, my brother seemed to see a flash of knife light above a watchtower. All nonsense talk. Why not? Otherwise, why would the superiors have ordered such strict day and night guarding these past 2 days? Maybe it's just a precaution. Precautions? If so, the opponent must be very powerful. That's why the Guardian ordered such a careful guard. I heard that the other person was the gang leader of Bitch Ba Gang or something, and it was rumored that his appearance was exactly like the old martial arts master Lu Fam. Is that true? Not only is it true, but his martial arts are extremely strange. Even 5 Bo 7 Souls Fuang Tran Tien was defeated by him. Oh, is it that terrible? I don't dare lie. His martial arts skills were unfathomably profound, destroying the lair of the Thiat Hong gang. Even Tai No, the soul-chasing king of hell, Thiep Ta Fong, almost lost his life at his hands. But please remember, we are different. Not sure what he could do to the 9 Heavenly Dao Palace. Not sure yet? Why? In today's martial arts world, the 9 Heavenly Dao Palace's position is unparalleled. Recently, Sino 2C reappeared as a wanderer. He was originally a close friend of the old Mandarin, so he sent someone to invite our Mandarin to join the alliance. I heard that the governor is considering this. If both sides join forces, they will surely wipe out all sects and martial arts. At that time, what could Bitch Ba Bang have against us? Yes, second brother's words make a lot of sense. As soon as they finished speaking, suddenly a white wolf head appeared behind them, looking extremely creepy. Right after that, a cold, terrifying voice slowly poured into their ears. "Hey, where's your governor?" The two men were startled and frightened. As soon as they turned around, they quickly raised their palms to attack. "Huh!" A faint laugh rang out from behind. The bodies of the two people were limp and slowly fell to the ground. The person standing in front of them was a tall and slender man, wearing a white wolf mask and a white AO dye. Knowing that they had fallen into the hands of experts, the other two men did not dare say a word. The man in white coldly spoke. "What trick are you going to play? Aren't you afraid that I will make your life worse than death?" The two men nodded silently. The other person continued asking, "Where's your lord?" "Upstairs behind the temple." "Is there a place to refine his prescriptions?" "Where?" "Yes, but we don't know where." "Really don't know?" "Huh, probably in the master's bedroom." "But it's best for the hero to just ask the person upstairs." "Okay, I'd like you two to lie here for a moment." "Ouch! Ouch!" A puff of pale smoke rose, and the white-clothed man disappeared. Not long after, three figures gathered in front of the building. They signaled to each other, then immediately dispersed in each direction. None of them was King Phi. The three quietly slid downstairs. Bokkat and Quan soon discovered two people hiding in the corner of the floor, where the underground watchtower was located. He silently approached behind, just in time to hear someone say softly, "Tu Ho, it seems like a shadow passed by. Could it be that an outsider broke in?" The person named Tu Ho replied softly, "I also have that feeling." Bokkat and Quan coldly continued from behind. "Let this old man confirm that feeling for you." The two men were extremely frightened. Before they could turn around, they were hit in a vital point. Even so, they still tried to roar weakly, "There are assassins." The screams had not ended yet and disappeared into the night. Bokkat and Quan smiled faintly and said in a deep voice, "If you are wise, answer him a few questions and the old man will spare your life." The two men just huffed and gritted their teeth without responding. Bokkat and Quan continued asking, "Where's the Quan Master's practice room? If you want to live, speak quickly." Seeing that they were still silent, he smiled slightly, raised his hand and lightly flicked the guy standing on the left. That guy just let out a huh sound. His whole body immediately turned red and swollen. Even so, he still didn't open his mouth. Fresh blood oozed from the face, nose, arms, and legs. The body convulsed in pain, the blood dripping endlessly. Bokkat and Quan coldly asked, "Why? Have you said it yet?" The guy on the right was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat and replied in a trembling voice, In the master's bedroom." "But that's just speculation, not sure if it's true." Bokkat and Quan coldly said, "Okay, I guess you don't dare to lie to this old man." Having finished speaking, he snapped his fingers again. The big man on the left only had time to make a huh sound. Blood spurted out violently, his eyes widened and then closed, falling to the ground dead on the spot. Bokkat and Quan turned to ask the other guy, "Where is the master's bedroom?" Seeing that his accomplice had just died tragically, this guy panicked and quickly replied, "In the west porch room, in the third building." "Okay, you lie down and rest for a while." Having finished speaking, Bokkat and Quan pointed at his sleeping acupuncture point. The guy yawned and immediately fell asleep. Bokkat and Quan immediately walked towards the third row of houses, and the other three people also followed one after another. When the four figures had just disappeared into the night, a dark shadow suddenly stepped out from the corner of the house and approached the body of the deceased. Immediately after that, two other black shadows appeared, carried the body away, and the remaining shadow released the acupuncture point of the man who had been put to sleep. The man yawned, and as soon as he opened his eyes, he knelt down in horror. The official and the petty person have failed in their responsibility. The black shadow smiled faintly and said coldly, "Go back down, this is not your fault." The guy quickly stood up and quietly left. At that moment, the master turned to a Taoist standing next to him and ordered, Give orders, withdraw all patrols from all around. The Taoist respectfully obeyed his orders, hurried downstairs to give orders, and ran around the Taoist Mandarin. In just a moment, more than 20 Taoists with agile bodies like ghosts appeared one after another. Just looking at the way they move is enough to see that they are all masters of martial arts. More than 20 people stood quietly behind the master, no one said a word. The surrounding space is as quiet as a sheet of paper. The official still covered his face with a black scarf, but just by looking at those cold eyes, the monks understood that he was extremely angry, his eyes fixed on the house ahead. Chapter 34. Heroes endure suffering. At that time, several Bacot and Quan people quietly approached the room. Their movements were as fast as a breeze, as light as a reed, gliding straight into the inner courtyard. There was a room in the courtyard. Inside there were whispers of conversation. Bacot and Quan leaned to the window and looked in. He saw a tall, muscular Taoist monk with his back to the door, holding a brocade box in his hand, softly instructing an old Taoist. This box of antidote was given to the disciple by the master, who told him to return it to the old Taoist to look after. He also said that the enemy came here tonight. The main purpose was just for this box of antidote. The old monk sat leaning on a large brocade-covered bed, eyes wide open, and suddenly coldly spoke out the window. If you come from far away, why don't you come here and chat? Bacot and Quan was startled and frightened, thinking to himself, this old Taoist is truly amazing. After thinking about it, he smiled faintly, his body moved, and he quickly jumped into the room. Almost at the same time, Bak Dat Fong, Gong Pham and Long Dain also followed, like ghosts, walking straight in. The old Taoist saw a few people flying in and immediately laughed. Great! Great! Many guests have arrived, welcome. As soon as the 4 people entered the room, they stood still. The old Taoist seemed to suddenly think of something, his face showing doubt. He saw Gong Pham wearing a curved sword and all 4 people wearing white wolf masks, so he looked at them in bewilderment without blinking. Bacot and Quan immediately spoke. It seems like the leader has something to teach. The old Taoist sighed, then slowly asked, are you people from Bich Ba Ho and Chung Nam Mountain who came here? Everyone who heard the old Taoist ask that could not help but be surprised. In the Wanderer, although everyone knows that Bich Ba Bang has recently emerged, almost no one knows where the general group is located. How could 4 people not be stunned? However, everyone is an experienced person. It is not easy to show panic because of a question. Long Dain immediately spoke up. The Taoist is really clear-headed. Yes, here with you are people from Bich Ba Ho who have come to seek spiritual medicine. Is it possible that the leader doesn't respect his brothers? The old Taoist's face softened and his voice was gentle. Since you've come to ask for the elixir, and you're also a member of Bich Van looking for a guest, how dare you not deliver the antidote to you? I'm just afraid that once you've stepped into this deep ambush, it will be difficult for you to fully retreat. Having finished speaking, he gave the antidote to Bacot and Quan. With extensive experience, Bacot and Quan saw that the other party gave him the antidote so easily. He couldn't help but be surprised and didn't know how to react. Only Bak Dat Fong took a step forward, picked up the gourd, and asked, may I ask what special relationship the leader has with the swordsman Bich Van, that right now, right here, he is willing to help us like that? The old Taoist sighed softly and slowly replied, more than 30 years ago, a young monk went to the mountain to pick medicine, but unfortunately was bitten by a poisonous snake. Fortunately, Bich Van, a passerby, saved his life. That kindness has not been forgotten until now. I just hope to repay it one day. Long Dain coldly interjected, someone's coming. Everyone immediately held their breath and listened, and sure enough, the sound of wind rustling clothes and Buddhas outside the courtyard was heard. The old Taoist immediately put on a serious face and continued, the current master of the 9 heavenly Tao Palace is the younger brother of the small Tao. Last year, he was sent to the harem to practice. He encountered many strange encounters and was especially favored by his senior brother, so his martial arts improved so quickly. Recently, Brother Bad suddenly announced that he would give up the position of Guan Guan to him, and he went out alone to wander around. Not long after, the younger brother announced that he had discovered the whereabouts of his greatest enemy and was determined to use all his power to deal with it. At that time, the young man did not expect that the enemy he was targeting would be the gallant people in Bich Ba Ho, so he accepted help. Who would have thought there could be such a coincidence and strange thing in the world? Things have come to this point. The poor man can only stand on the sidelines and not help either side. Having finished speaking, the old Taoist clasped his hands in greeting to everyone, then gently passed through the window and left. As soon as his body disappeared, Baghdad Fong quickly called out, "Please stop, leader." But the old Taoist was determined not to get involved, and his martial arts skills were profound, so before Baghdad Fong's words had finished, the figure disappeared without a trace. Bak Captain Quan suddenly came up with a plan and lowered his voice. "We must leave this place immediately." At that moment, suddenly there was a very soft click sound. The light in the room went out. The windows on all four walls disappeared at the same time, leaving all sides pitch black. Long Dain waved his left hand and hit a straight palm towards the old window, only to hear a bang sound. Only then did he realize that the wall was extremely hard. Next, there were continuous swoosh sounds. From all four openings countless cold stars shot out, as fast as rain, aiming straight at everyone. Dong Pham whirled the sword around, then heard the constant clinking sounds. All the hidden weapons shot from all directions were cut to pieces, turning into scrap iron and falling to the ground. Long Dain said in a deep voice, "We must think of a way to escape." Baghdad Fong immediately replied, "I'm afraid that wanting to leave this place won't be easy." Bakat and Quan coldly interjected, "According to the old man, they also used other tricks, not just that." Gong Pham continued in a deep voice, "I wonder where the boss is right now. Will we encounter enemies like us?" Long Dain quickly replied, "The gang leader is more clever than anyone else, and will not be as foolish as us to fall into the enemy's trap like this." Bakat and Quan thought for a moment and then said, "Perhaps this place is like a sealed cast iron box, leaving only vents." As soon as the words ended, a soft warning voice suddenly rang out above his head, "Be careful." The four people immediately spread out, huddling close to the four walls. At the same time, Bakat and Quan shouted loudly, "Poisonous water!" All four simultaneously raised their palms to attack, blocking the flow of liquid pouring down from above. The room immediately emitted a strong fishy smell, extremely unpleasant, and toxic water fountains continued to spray out. In just a moment, the whole room was covered in poison. The four people used wind palms to push the poisonous water to the sides, but the poison fountains continued to pour down, making everyone frantic and confused. At that moment, from outside the room came a faint laugh, followed by a cold voice. "You guys are about to have a great show to watch." That voice echoed down from the top, but no one could determine which direction it came from. As soon as the words ended, there was a click sound, accompanied by a very soft squeak sound. The four walls suddenly revealed countless tiny holes, from which poisonous water rushed out, as fast as an arrow leaving the bowstring. Seeing this, Long Dain shouted loudly, "Concentrate!" All four immediately gathered in the middle of the room, back to back, simultaneously using their palms to attack the holes, preventing the poisonous water from hitting them. Although the poisonous water jets were thrown in all directions by the wind and could not reach their bodies, the poisonous water below was rising higher and higher. All four of them were extremely worried, not knowing how to deal with the poisonous water under their feet. At that moment, the sound of poofing rang out again. From the top of the room, black water continued to flow down, and at the same time, the four walls spewed out opaque white smoke. When Bakat and Quan saw it, he was immediately frightened. He quickly waved his sleeve, pushed the white smoke and toxic gas aside, and shouted loudly, "Be careful! White smoke is toxic." As soon as he finished speaking, his nose smelled a strange scent. The toxic vapor immediately rushed straight to his brain, making him dizzy, unable to stand, and then falling to the ground. Seeing this, Gong Fam quickly turned around, reached out his hand to support Thin Quan, and tried his best to help him stand up. Just as the four people fell into a desperate position, a few ha-ha sounds suddenly rang out on the roof of the room, followed by several bodies rolling around, falling straight from the roof to the ground. Right after that, a large space suddenly opened on the roof of the room, and Kim Phi's voice echoed down. "Quickly leave this place!" Gong Fam happily exclaimed. "The gang leader has come to save us." Having finished speaking, he hugged Bakat and Quan tightly and threw himself onto the roof. Following closely behind are Bak Dat Fong and Long Dain. As soon as Kim Phi looked at Thin Quan's face, he quickly said, "Brother Thin Quan, hurry up and push the poisonous gas out, if you're too slow." Before he finished speaking, several Taoists jumped onto the roof and surrounded everyone. Among them was a burly Taoist monk with his face covered. The masked Taoist looked proud and arrogantly spoke, "Sword Phi, this place is your grave." Kim Phi smiled faintly and replied contemptuously, "It should be said that it is your grave." The masked Taoist smiled grimly and raised his left hand to lightly signal. Immediately, from all around, a large number of Taoists from the 9 Heavenly Tao Palace rushed out, approaching at the same time. Their bodies were extremely agile. Clearly all were martial arts masters. At the same time, the burly Taoist raised his right hand and pulled down the veil, shouting loudly, "Sword Phi, do you still remember who I am?" Kim Phi was stunned and softly exclaimed, "Van Tik. Turns out it was you. The masked Taoist is Van Tik." He burst into horrifying laughter like a crying ghost, then pointed straight at Kim Phi and ordered the monks, "Kill them all. Don't let a single one survive." As soon as the command was given, several Taoists immediately unsheathed their long swords and rushed straight towards Kim Phi. Long Dain roared, "If you want to die, I'll let you die." Immediately, a decisive battle broke out on the roof. Shadows flashed, swords clashed, steel glowed in the night. Gong Fam used the Chaos Moon Knife, and when he encountered an enemy, he stabbed and slashed without mercy. Kim Phi swung the Bitch Van sword. The sword light was so dense that even wind and rain could not penetrate. The three people fought and protected Bakat and Quan, who was sitting and adjusting his breathing, using all his strength to force the poison out of his body. The pitiful screams rang out endlessly, raindrops of blood splattered across the roof. However, the Taoist monks of the 9 Tien Dao Palace became more and more crowded, surrounding the four people. After an hour of fierce fighting, all four were tired and sweat poured down their faces. The white Silang masks were stained with fresh blood, while the pressure from all sides continued to increase. In addition to the Taoist monks who were fighting, they were all masters, and there were also many people around who were watching the battle, whose martial arts skills were not inferior at all. Van Tik laughed proudly, "Ha ha! Dang Kim Phi. This time, even if you want to live, it will be more difficult than going to heaven." Having finished speaking, he brandished his long sword and led 10 elite Taoists straight into battle. Suddenly, a white shadow rushed into the air, accompanied by a cold voice, "Not sure." Immediately, several terrible screams rang out, and blood splashed again. Bakat and Quan stood up, performed Bakat Claw, a martial art that had never been used for a long time, and rushed straight into the battle. The pressure on all sides became heavier and heavier. Kim Phi loudly asked, "Brother Tien Sat, have you recovered yet?" Bakat and Quan immediately replied, "It's as usual, thank you boss." Kim Phi raised his head to look at the sky, suddenly let out a wolf howl. The sound was extremely scary. The other four also used all their strength to counterattack. The situation immediately reversed. Kim Phi's side gained the upper hand. At that moment, from the Kukung mountain area, a mournful howling sound came from the mountain area. Long Dain immediately roared like a tiger, "Come here! This time you all die." He raised his head and howled again, even more terrifying than before. Van Tik smiled strangely and said coldly, "Kill these guys first, then consider the others later." He raised his long sword to signal. Immediately, All the Taoists present rushed in at once, causing more than 30 people on the roof to surround the 5 King Phi group. The fight lasted for a long time, and the 5 people gradually got tired. Suddenly King Phi shouted loudly, "Rush down!" The sword light flashed. Bitch Van's sword turned into a strip of green light. King Phi rushed straight down. Immediately after that, Bok Captain Quan, Bok Dat Fong and Kung Pham also jumped in turn and rushed into the crowd. Under the flickering light, people's silhouettes flickered, their screams echoed endlessly, and more blood spewed out. Bok Dat Fong's left arm was seriously injured, and Kung Pham could not avoid being seriously injured. However, everyone clearly understood that even to the last drop of blood, they would not back down and risk their lives to fight back against the enemy. King Phi put all his effort into performing Bitch Van 3 forms. At the same time, his left hand swung the Kim Huk Divine Sword. Its power was exerted to the limit. The green and yellow sword light flashed brightly. Wherever the sword went, the enemy fell. No matter how numerous the enemy was and how powerful their martial arts were, they couldn't do anything to him at the moment. However, after a fierce battle, King Phi gradually felt his strength wasting away. Suddenly, from far away, a long howl echoed through the wind. The Bitch Ba Bang brothers used all their strength to rush to the rescue, but were still more than 10 miles from the battlefield. Meanwhile, Van Tik's group was pressing frantically, and the situation became extremely dangerous. Chapter 35. Eternal Hatred. Seeing that the situation was unfavorable, King Phi immediately danced both the Bitch Van sword and the Kim Huk Then sword, launched himself into the air, circled several times, turning into 2 brilliant yellow-green streaks of light, slashing straight down from all 4 directions. He used the Cloud Dragon 9 forms to destroy the enemy in one blow. Indeed, Van Tik is not an ordinary person. Seeing this, he was startled and quickly shouted at the monks, "Be careful!" Having finished speaking, he swung his long sword and rushed forward to block. The sound of weapons colliding Kung rang out continuously, fireflies splashed, 2 figures were knocked out in both directions. King Phi let out another long howl. The green-gold sword light continued to rush into the group of Taoists. Horrible screams arose in all directions, and more blood spewed out. Suddenly, a mournful howl rang out, then the howls rose from all directions. The Bitch Ba Bang brothers promptly came to the rescue. Van Tik was still attentively watching King Phi. Suddenly he shouted loudly, his long sword waved and turned into a sword light, stabbing straight at Bok Dat Fong. At that time, Bok Dat Fong was surrounded by more than 10 Taoist monks, dozens of swords simultaneously aimed at vital points. He was alone holding the sword to defend from all directions. Suddenly, he saw a flash of sword light approaching. He couldn't help but be frightened and quickly raised his sword to welcome it. Just heard a kung sound, followed immediately by a terrible scream. His whole body was covered in blood and he staggered back. Suddenly, a loud shout rang out. Dozens of swords were raised at the same time and stabbed straight at him. Bok Dat Fong roared angrily and fell to the ground. After Van Tik finished killing Bok Dat Fong, he immediately turned around to attack Bok Captain Quan, who was in a fierce battle with the Taoist monks. At this time, Bok Captain Quan was using Bok Kat Claw and Bok Captain Song to fight more than 10 Taoist monks. Seeing Bok Dat Fong die so tragically, he roared in anger, his arms flapped, white smoke rising. In just a blink of an eye, the 2 Taoists fell dead on the spot. Seeing this, Van Tik immediately waved his sword and rushed forward, aiming straight at Bok Captain Quan. Bok Captain Quan smiled faintly, turned around, and gently avoided the opponent's 3 sword stances. He stretched out his hand and pulled hard, his body circled around and hid behind a Taoist monk, and at the same time, with his other hand, he made an extremely fierce move. That turn and evasive move made everyone surprised. The Taoist man was caught off guard and rushed forward in panic, just in time for the shiny blade to stab in. Before he could cry out, his chest was pierced and blood splattered. Seeing that scene, Bok Captain Quan shouted, "How cruel!" Having finished speaking, He raised his hands to brush away the two long swords that had just stabbed him, and at the same time used the white bone claw, counterattacking straight towards Van Tik. Van Tik laughed strangely, his long sword swung up, aiming right at his chest. Bak Kat Then Quan also smiled coldly and replied, "The old man is not shy." As he spoke, he slid to the side and conveniently knocked down another Taoist. At that moment, the terrible screams echoed throughout the front of the palace. Next, the wolf howled loudly, and 4 white shadows quickly rushed into the battle. When Quang Pham saw this, he laughed madly, swung his sword and rushed straight forward. The 2 shadows were immediately knocked out. Long Dain also laughed loudly, brandishing Tai Long Dao with a flashing golden light. Wherever the knife went, blood sprayed out. Wai roared loudly, "Brothers, rush to kill!" Immediately afterwards, silhouettes of people roamed, sword lights flashed, more than a dozen angel-like figures descended from all 4 directions, 3 faces rushing in simultaneously. The fresh blood of the Taoist monks flowed out like a stream, and the pitiful screams mingled into a farewell song in the middle of the battlefield. Kim Phi fought harder and harder, cutting down a Taoist coming from behind, then raised his face to the sky and howled loudly. Before the screams ended, his body was as fast as lightning, rushing straight in front of Van Tik. At that time, Van Tik was almost crazy. He did not expect Bitch Ba Bang to be so powerful. He originally believed that this time he would surely win, but he did not expect that the situation would turn around and his entire army would be destroyed. Thinking so, he laughed loudly, swung his sword forward, and tried his best to block his opponent's 2 swords of yellow and blue light. As soon as the 2 sides collided, a fierce battle immediately broke out. Only now did Van Tik truly know how powerful King Phi is. The pressure from all 4 directions made him terrified. His body seemed to be drifting in the middle of a boundless sea. The green-gold sword light glowed brighter and brighter. The pressure on all sides became heavier and heavier. Even though he had mobilized 10 million true powers, he still could not resist. He desperately broke through in one direction, hoping to find a way to escape. At that moment, a long burst of laughter suddenly rang in my ears. King Phi's voice rang like a bell. "This time, the clan master can no longer forgive you." As soon as the voice ended, Van Tik suddenly felt the pressure around him lighten. He was so happy, he quickly jumped up and suddenly felt numb. His true energy was scattered, his arms and legs were weak, he had no strength left. His body felt light, as if someone behind him grabbed his collar and pulled him across the roof. Outside the palace, he opened his eyes and saw 4 white-shirted warriors, wearing wolf masks, holding curved swords, guarding a splendid carriage. At that moment, Kim Phi's voice rang out again. "Right now your true power has been completely scattered. Out of respect for our mutual friendship, I will spare your death. Well, go." At this moment, Van Tik clearly understood. All his years of hard work cultivating his ultimate skill had now been completely wiped out. The heart-wrenching pain made him stand up defiantly, his face gloomy. The 4 white-shirted warriors immediately bowed to Kim Phi. Kim Phi slightly bounced his feet, his body sliding towards the carriage. He bent down to look inside, saw Lai Hong still lying still, as if he was still unconscious, so he sighed and said, "Sister Hong, fortunately God does not disappoint those who care." Suddenly a white-shirted boxer shouted loudly, "Do you dare?" Kim Phi quickly turned his head, only to see a short sword stuck deep into Van Tik's chest. He staggered forward, his eyes widened, and he struggled to say, "The Dang family, this feud, let's settle it in the next generation." Having finished speaking, he fell to the ground, the tip of the knife pierced his back, and blood flowed freely. Seeing that scene, Kim Phi said in a deep voice, "This cannot be blamed on anyone." At that time, in the 9 Heavenly Dao Palace, only a few miserable screams could be heard. Kim Phi raised his face to the sky and let out a long roar. Before the screams ended, the Bitch Ba Bang brothers flew out from inside the palace. In the blink of an eye, everyone was fully gathered, standing solemnly in front of Kim Phi. Behind them, several Taoist monks, covered in blood, still staggered after them. Kim Phi coldly shouted, "Stand still." Lao Tien quickly shouted, "Stand still!" The roar was as loud as thunder, causing the group of Taoists to be frightened and suddenly stopped. King Fai coldly continued, "Did you know? The main reason for this killing is because your lord and his subordinates have personal enmity. From now on, the resentment on both sides has ended. I hope that from now on, you will follow the righteous path and become human beings. Well, please go inside." The monks were stunned for a moment, then simultaneously bowed to King Fai and quietly retreated into the temple. Only two old monks leisurely advanced. At that time, Bien Ho stood majestically not far from the Mandarin. Seeing two people approaching, he smiled faintly and asked, "What do you want to do?" The two old men bowed to each other and replied, "The resentment between Master Dang Bang and the bad Mandarin is still unclear. But from now on, the Mandarins decided not to get involved in the affairs of the gangsters anymore." Having said that, they both stopped. The old Taoist standing on the right continued, "If you need to borrow currency, please feel free to do so." The old man was busy and couldn't entertain him any further. Having finished speaking, he clasped his hands and bowed, turned, and walked quickly into the temple. At that time, Long Dain walked up to King Fai, bowed respectfully, held up a brocade box with both hands, and said, "Sir, this is the antidote." King Fai carefully opened the lid of the box. The pure scent rushed out, making his mind unusually alert. He nodded and said, "Yes, this is the antidote." Everyone saw King Fai testing the medicine himself and admired his wise medical practice. He turned around, opened the carriage curtain to look at Lai Hong, and then said to everyone, "It's best to take her to the temple for treatment." Bien Ho and Ho Fong hurriedly entered the temple, then returned a moment later and said, having made it clear, they were willing to lend a room. King Fai immediately carried Lai Hong into the temple. At that time, there was already a young boy cleaning the room. King Fai carried Lai Hong in and gently placed her on the bed. Gong Pham, Long Dain, and Loyang were ordered to clean up the battlefield. King Fai told Quang Thiat 5 knights, "You guys stay outside the room to protect the king's dharma." The 5 people were ordered to retreat. He again said to Lao Tien and Bak Kat and Quan, "The 2 of you stay in the room and give me a hand." Lao Tien and Bak Kat and Quan immediately stayed. King Fai slowly walked to the side of the trap, took the antidote for Lai Hong to drink and then helped her sit up. He sat behind her, placed his left hand on the vital point behind her back, and used 2 fingers of his right hand to gently tap a few times. Lao Tien and Bak Kat and Quan stood next to them, their expressions tense, attentively on guard. A moment later, white smoke began to rise from King Fai's body. Immediately after that, black energy also flowed from Lai Hong's body. Her face gradually became rosy, and she sweated profusely. Same goes for King Fai. Seeing that, Lao Tien quickly rushed forward, placed a hand on King Fai's acupuncture points, and transferred his true strength to him. King Fai realized the good intention and smiled slightly, taking it as a thank you. Before that, King Fai fought fiercely, and then fought with Van Tik, consuming too much true strength. Moreover, because he was so worried about Lai Hong, he used all his internal strength to save her. That's why he was so exhausted at this moment. If it weren't for Lao Tien's timely help, I'm afraid he would have been in danger this time. A moment later, the black energy on Lai Hong's body gradually dissipated. King Fai raised his right hand and waved lightly. Immediately a stream of white smoke rose, covering the remaining black air, causing it to condense and then quickly be sucked into his body. In just a blink of an eye, white smoke gradually entered King Fai's body. At that time, the sweat on Lao Tien's face flowed profusely, showing that he had lost a lot of true strength. The room was as quiet as paper. Lai Hong still lay still, showing no signs of waking up. King Fai's face was pale. He sat motionless, from his nostrils slowly escaping 2 streams of white air. Lao Tien's face was now more rosy, and he was sitting and doing exercises to control his breath. Only Bak Kat and Quan quietly sat there, his eyes constantly scanning all around, carefully guarding all 3 people. because at this time, if someone intruded and Bakat and Quan did not have time to stop, Kim Fai and the other two people would surely die on the spot. That's why, even though there were 5 knights strictly guarding him outside, he still didn't dare to let his guard down. His eyes were always alert. Suddenly, a long howl echoed from afar, a chilling sound that sent chills down my spine. Chapter 36. 2 tigers fighting over heroes. At that time, the sky had just dawned, and a terrifying howl suddenly rang out in Kung Mountain, echoing far away, sending chills down everyone's spine. That howl must have had a reason. Whoever sent it out, if not to attack the 9 Heavens Dao Palace, then also aimed at the people of the Bitch Ba gang. Therefore, everyone is extremely stressed. Especially Bakat and Quan. As soon as he heard it, he immediately raised his vigilance, deployed all his magical powers to protect his body, was ready to risk his life to fight, and was determined not to back down. As soon as the howling ended, all around fell into absolute silence, so quiet that you could clearly hear the sound of breathing. The air pressed down heavily from all 4 directions. Bakat and Quan attentively followed every movement around, and Bitch Ba Bang's disciples outside the door also tightened their defenses. Suddenly, another long and miserable howl rang out, this time very close. Just listening is enough to know that the person who sent it has extremely high power, and is definitely not an ordinary expert. Bakat and Quan was startled, quickly glanced into the room to see the 3 people still sitting motionless, then immediately turned to look at the window and door in case anything happened. Suddenly a strange voice rang out. "What are you little demons doing?" Listening to Loyan's voice, it was enough to understand that the enemy was not just one person. Immediately followed by high-pitched laughter accompanied by a voice. "Call the Dang family here to answer." Gong Fam replied. "Please tell us your name first." The high-pitched laughter sounded again. "Who are you to dare to ask my name?" Loyan immediately continued. "What a bold person, how dare you come here to cause trouble?" Suddenly a strong, cold voice replied. "If you don't call the Dang family here to answer, don't blame the old man for being rude." Gong Fam laughed. "You haven't registered yet, so don't expect to open this door today." The 2 sides stood outside the palace gate arguing back and forth, then the high-pitched voice shouted again. "Not much to say. Quickly call Kin Fai to come here and apologize and die." Loyan shouted loudly. "Kid, do you really want to die?" Before the words were finished, there was a shocking boom sound, accompanied by 2 huh groans. Gong Fam laughed again. "Very good, also has some bravery. Taste this captain's sword." Outside the palace gate, the sound of the wind whistled continuously. The cold voice from before rang out again. "Go heavy, kill this guy and talk later." The sound of the wind became more and more urgent and intense, enough to know how fierce the battle outside was. At that time, the team members and soldiers all came to the gate to watch the fighting. As for Kim Fai, he still sat motionless on the trap, 2 streams of white air spewing out from his nose, gradually growing larger like 2 child's arms, constantly protruding and receding. Suddenly, those 2 streams of white air completely entered his nose. Kim Fai opened his eyes and looked at Lao Tian. Lao Tian also opened his eyes, smiled, and then they both stood up. Seeing that, Bakat and Quan breathed a sigh of relief. Kim Fai looked at Lai Hong, then turned to Bakat and Quan and Lao Tian and advised, "Would you 2 please protect Miss Lai for me?" The 2 respectfully obeyed. Kim Fai immediately pushed the door open and walked straight out. The 5 knights were frantically defending. When they saw Kim Fai appear, they all bowed their heads in ceremony. He smiled slightly and said gently, "Today has been hard for you." The Golden Knight, the leader of the 5 knights, quickly replied respectfully, "There are 4 enemies in total. 2 guys are fighting with Captain and Big Brother Loy, and 2 more guys are standing outside." Kim Fai continued asking, "What did they come here for?" When they arrived, they only said they wanted to find the clan leader to take revenge. Kim Fai chuckled, "So let's go out and take a look." Having finished speaking, he leisurely walked out of the temple, 5 knights following closely behind. The 6 people looked like they were walking very slowly, but in just a blink of an eye, they arrived at the entrance of the temple. Outside the square, the wind whistled and dust filled the air. Loyan and Gong Pham are fighting fiercely with 2 old men with white hair, neat clothes, and extremely dangerous moves. On the other side, the Sun's son Hong Kai-Vu faced an old man with white hair, luxurious clothes, tall and muscular body, and unpredictable cunning demeanor. As soon as Hong Kai-Vu saw Kim Phi step out, he smiled faintly and said, "Dang Kim Phi, the day of your death has come." Kim Phi did not answer, just glanced quickly at the match. His face immediately changed, and then shouted, "Loyan, Gong Pham, quickly retreat." The 2 immediately obeyed the order and retreated back. Kim Phi smiled and continued, "You 2, rest for a while." At the same time, he used voice transmission to secretly advise, "Quickly go inside and protect Miss Lai Hong, in case she gets kidnapped." The 2 respectfully obeyed and immediately returned to the temple. Kim Phi coldly looked at young Master De Sun and asked, "What are you doing here today?" Hong Kai-Vu was stunned for a moment, then smiled and replied, "Today this young master came to reclaim the debt that God had arranged." Kim Phi softly said, "Oh," and continued asking, "I wonder which special characters you can invite to assist in the battle." Having finished speaking, he looked around, his face showing disappointment, his voice cold. "I don't see anyone qualified to block one of my moves." "Well, please go home." The silver-haired old man standing next to Hong Kai-Vu heard that and smiled faintly and said, "The old man has never seen such an arrogant kid." His voice was both tough and cold, making anyone who heard him shiver in fear. Kim Phi smiled faintly and slowly said, "Please state your name so I can see if I am qualified to stand here and speak." The 2 old men standing to the side heard that and took a step forward and shouted loudly, "Shut up! Do you dare to be so arrogant in front of the mountain master?" Kim Phi suddenly burst out laughing. "Hong Kwa Tien, even if you don't come, I will still go to the sun to find you." Having finished speaking, he raised his left hand and gently waved it. A red light as thin as a thread flashed, accompanied by a very soft pop sound. Right in front of Master De Sun, a small purple-pink fan was stuck into the ground. As soon as Hong Kwa Tien saw the fan, his face immediately changed. Why quickly forced a smile. "Ha ha, I didn't expect you guys to be my subordinates." Kim Phi coldly snorted, "Don't talk too much. Today, on behalf of the righteous father, I will clean the gateway." Hong Kwa Tien raised his face and smiled faintly. Even if the owner of this fan personally came here, he wouldn't be able to do anything to this old man, let alone you. After speaking, he still smiled faintly. At that moment, another cold laugh suddenly rang out, followed by an icy voice. "Huh, huh, this old man can't do anything to you even if he comes here himself?" "Huh, huh." Everyone simultaneously looked towards the old tree. A blue shadow as light as the wind swept forward. When I got closer, I saw that it was a skinny old man, wearing a blue AO dye, with an elongated face. As soon as he saw that old man, Kim Phi was overjoyed and rushed forward to shout, "Secondary meaning, secondary meaning." The old man in the blue shirt smiled kindly, his eyes full of comfort, and replied gently, "Phi Ni." Father and son held each other's hands tightly and looked at each other quietly for a long time without saying a word. Tears welled up, enough to see the profound love. Master De Sun was stunned for a moment, then smiled faintly and said, "If there is nothing else to do, the old man will take his leave first." Hong Kai-Vu was so surprised that he was stunned and stammered and asked, "Father, what about Lai Hong?" Hong Kwa Tien rolled his eyes and lightly scolded, "Useless things." Formerly Phien Ma in the past, now the master of Lang Hukak, the blue-shirted old man gently let go of Kim Phi's hand and said kindly, "Phi Ni, let me get rid of this traitor who goes against the teacher first, then talk to you later." Kim Phi shook his head. "No, please let me fulfill my old promise." Lang Hukak master smiled and replied, "No way. Today's Hong Kwa Tien is no longer the Hong Kwa Tien of yesteryear, leaving his father to deal with him." Kim Phi took a step forward, smiled and said, "Father, can you let me be unfaithful?" Lang Hu Cockmaster pondered for a moment, then nodded. Okay, please be careful. In the past, Hong Kwa Tien was terrified of Fien Ma, so he had to hide at the border, suffering in hermitage, determined not to dare step foot into the Central Plains. Even though they have been apart for many years now, every time he remembers the fierce battle between teacher and student, he is still terrified. The fear has never disappeared. At this time, Kim Fai proactively asked to fight, but Fien Ma nodded his permission, making Hong Kwa Tien extremely happy. However, he still tried to maintain a cold look and said, "Kid, stand aside. You are not the old man's opponent." Kim Fai burst out laughing. "If in 50 rounds I cannot kill you, I will raise my arms and surrender my head to death, and all resentment will be erased." Everyone who heard this shivered in horror. The Sun's master is not ordinary, yet Kim Fai dares to say that in just 50 rounds he will take the opponent's life. It is truly too arrogant. Lang Hu Cockmaster was also startled and blurted out, "Fai Ni." Then he continued with a serious face, "Okay, you have to be very careful." Having finished speaking, he smiled and encouraged him. Hong Kwa Tien sneered, "Okay. If this old man loses to you in 50 rounds, from now on, the Dasun sect will forever obey your orders." That statement was tantamount to declaring that once he lost, the Dasun sect would become Kim Fai's subordinates. Having finished speaking, he smiled proudly, waved his hand, and a fan appeared in his hand. From the fan suddenly emanated sparkling silver light. He waved his fan, smiled faintly, and said, "Kid, take out your weapon." Kim Fai smiled arrogantly, pulling the Bitch Van sword from its sheath. This match was different from previous encounters, so both were extremely cautious. The Sun owner Hong Kwa Tien raised his fan and slowly walked around Kim Fai once. Kim Fai still held the long sword in her hand, her legs stood as steady as iron mountains, not moving even half a step. The atmosphere was heavily tense. Everyone held their breath, their hearts pounding, their eyes glaring at the arena. Kim Fai remained motionless, while Hong Kwa Tien moved faster and faster, until finally only a stream of silver light could be seen rotating around Kim Fai's body. His body had completely blurred. Suddenly a stream of blue light rose up, blue and silver collided violently. After 30 rounds, suddenly there was a loud boom sound. Sand and dust were flying everywhere, and the wind was rolling violently. The two experts had just stepped back and rushed forward, but a deep hole had appeared on the ground. At that moment, a long howl that cut the wind rang out, a blue light shot straight into the sky, silver light from the fan immediately followed closely. The white light shot up and suddenly spread out into a blue cloud, facing down towards the silver light. Boom! Another earth-shattering explosion. The golden light was thrown upwards, the silver light fell downwards. At that moment, Kim Fai performed Van Long Q Tuk, not Twin Few, combined with Bitch Van Tam Tuk. The sword's momentum was like a storm, continuously hitting Hong Kwa Tien's head. It was then the 41st inning. Hong Kwa Tien shook the fan, turning into thousands of fan shadows, like fireworks shooting into the air. Suddenly, in the sword light above, a stream of blue light shot out. Hong Kwa Tien did not have time to be on guard. Seeing this, his face changed in fright. In a panic, he used all his strength to jump 5 feet to the left, but the green light was like a swarm of locusts rolling through the field, following closely and not leaving. Master Dasun gritted his teeth, pursed his lips, swung his left hand back, and threw the silver fan into a bright rainbow, shooting straight at Kim Fai. At the same time, he clasped his hands together and used all his strength to strike out a move. From the palm of his hand, 2 streams of dark red blood shot out like 2 red-hot iron bars. Several intense explosions rang out, followed by continuous swoosh, swoosh sounds, and people's figures flashed wildly. Hong Kwa Tien was thrown more than 10 feet away. Kim Fai still stood proudly in place, holding a long sword in her hand. His white robe was stained with blood, his left arm had a wound the size of a finger, fresh blood was dripping. Victory or defeat is clear. Young Master De Sun immediately lost his voice and called out, "Father!" He rushed forward and hugged Hong Kwa Tien, crying, "Father, father!" Lang Hukok Master also flew to King Fai's side, raised his hand to pat him gently, pointed at an acupuncture point to stop the bleeding, and then asked, "Fai Ni, are you okay?" King Fai's face turned pale. He forced a smile and replied, "It's okay, I killed him." Young Master De Sun stood up straight and bowed to King Fai. Today's kindness, Hong Kai Vu will never forget for the rest of his life. Having finished speaking, he carried Hong Kwa Tien's body and quietly left with the other two old men. Master Lang Hukok softened his voice and said to King Fai, "Fai Ni, please go inside the temple to rest for a while. My father still has something to tell me." Having said that, he suddenly turned his eyes towards the ancient tree more than 10 meters away and shouted loudly, "Someone! Why so sneaky?" Behind the tree, laughter rang out. 3 figures immediately flew out. The person standing in the middle waved his hand and threw a beam of white light straight at King Fai. Then the 3 turned around and rushed into the forest, disappearing in an instant. Lang Hukok Master reached out to grab it, only to realize it was just a blank piece of paper. In his heart, he couldn't help but feel scared, thinking, "This person's power is truly profound." He immediately opened the paper and saw written on it, 10 days later, "Please come to Dong Tien Nai behind the 9 Palace Mountains to talk." Undersigned, Sino 2C and Gabo That Han. Obviously this is a public challenge letter. Lang Hukok Master smiled faintly and handed the paper to King Fai. After watching, he coldly said, "Great. Take this opportunity to completely resolve all their matters." Having finished speaking, everyone returned to the temple to rest. Chapter 37. The final bloody battle. Everyone went into the temple to rest. King Fai immediately sent someone to invite the host to come and meet him. Not long after, an old monk with white hair and beard walked out respectfully. King Fai clasped his hands in ceremony and asked, "The bad guys want to stay here for 10 days. I wonder if the boss will allow it." The old Taoist blinked his eyes and slowly replied, "Donors stay in the coffin, poor people are very welcome. It's just that in recent days, many martial arts characters have appeared on Kung Mountain. I'm afraid something big is about to happen. If there is an incident at that time, it will be difficult for the officials to ensure the safety of everyone in your clan." King Fai smiled and replied, "Please don't worry about that point, Director. With the brothers eating and sleeping, I hope the leader will help a little, that's enough. As for the safety of the religion, we brothers are responsible for ourselves." The old monk nodded in acceptance. King Fai said, "If the director has work to do, please feel free." The old Taoist immediately left. King Fai told his brothers to help the Taoists clean up the bodies and ruins after the recent battle. In the fierce battle at Qtien Dao Palace, the Koi Dao team sacrificed 3 more people. The most painful thing was that Bog Datfong was seriously injured and passed away. The other brothers, whether seriously or lightly injured, were all treated by Lang Hukok Master and King Fai, and gradually recovered after only 2 or 3 days. During those few days, everyone carefully mobilized their energy to prepare for the upcoming decisive battle. This battle will definitely become a bloody catastrophe, shocking the martial arts world. If the Bitch Ba Bang brothers reacted carelessly, it would not be wrong to fear that the entire army would be destroyed. Therefore, in addition to practicing martial arts himself, every night King Fai also personally commanded and practiced the Chu Fong Lone Moon Blade battle for the entire state. Time passed quickly. Early in the morning of the 8th day, Lang Hu Valley Master took out a book Memories of the Wanderer from his bag and gave it to King Fai, and said in a deep voice, "Little baby, if you read this secret book, you will know clearly who your father is, and who is the family enemy." King Fai took it, opened it, and flipped through the pages. After reading for a while, he suddenly exclaimed, "La Fam is your father. Sino 2C is a great enemy." At that moment, Lai Hong, who had just recovered from his illness, heard the screams and asked in horror, "Fai Xie, what's going on?" Kim Phi gave the book to her to see. Lai Hong gritted his teeth and said, "Phi brother, we must kill them all." That night, Kim Phi gave an order. In addition to the guard, all the brothers in the gang must gather in his room to discuss the enemy's plan. After a long period of time, everyone discussed and reluctantly agreed on a plan. The next day, that plan was discussed again, and then everyone prepared to leave. Everyone was both excited and nervous. They all understand that if they win this decisive battle, the Bitch Ba gang will become the largest gang in the world. If they fail, they will all die on Kung Mountain. According to preliminary estimates, the enemy's experts were at least 50 people, so each member of Bitch Ba Bang had to deal with no less than 3 experts. Otherwise death would be inevitable. Time passed slowly, until the morning of the 10th day. As soon as it was dark, the Bitch Ba Bang brothers started their journey, while the injured stayed behind to recuperate. More than 20 people all wore white Ao dye. Among them, only Lang Hu Cup Master still wore blue clothes, the rest were all dressed in white. Everyone moved quickly, taking turns checking their weapons and then standing still waiting for orders. Everything was prepared. Kim Phi immediately gave the order to depart. 20 people immediately rushed away like arrows, straight into the Van Sun Range. Dat Men Nai is located in the middle of Kung Mountain area. The group of people looked like more than 20 streams of silver light, quickly moving towards it. The sky gradually brightened, the sun rose high, Dot Men Chu appeared before our eyes. At this time, more than 60 people had gathered on the summit, all martial arts experts. In that group there were monks, men and women, old and young. They divided into groups, some standing, some sitting, waiting quietly. Among those people, there was a tall, muscular man with an ugly face and wearing a yellow Confucian robe. He closed his eyes tightly, sitting cross-legged on the ground. His hair and beard were messy, yellow, and his age was hard to tell. At first glance it looked as if he was sitting in the middle of a pale yellow smoke screen. If you look closely, you will see that there is a hazy vapor surrounding the body. While meditating, he suddenly opened his eyes, 2 streams of red light shooting out from them. When he opened his eyes, everyone saw that his irises were red and pink, looking extremely terrifying. He smiled faintly and said, "Here we come." Hearing that, everyone opened their eyes and looked around, but there was still no one in sight. At that moment, another cold voice suddenly rang out, "Yes, here it comes." The person who spoke was 5 Bo that Sol Phuong Tran Tien. A moment later, more than 10 more people nodded, indicating that they had sensed the other person's presence. The guy in the yellow shirt smiled faintly and said, "The old man will make them die without a place to bury them." A moment later, more than 20 white-shirt warriors appeared on the steep pass. The guy in the yellow shirt made a soft "oh" sound and then continued. Sure enough, even Fien Ma also followed them. Ngubo that Sol just smiled faintly and did not comment. Hak sat home on a Tran Tin raised his hand to stroke his goatee and said coldly, "With or without Fien Demon, we will destroy them all." The yellow shirt guy smiled faintly. No need for friends to help. But even if he took action, he wouldn't necessarily be able to defeat Fien Ma. Tran Tin was momentarily stunned, then immediately smiled and asked, "Is it possible that Senior Sino is still afraid of him?" That yellow-shirt man is Sino 2C, who is famous for his evil and cruel reputation. Sino 2C chuckled and replied, "The old man has a way to defeat him, but the old brother is not strong enough." Thuong Quan Hong, the owner of Thuong Quan Bao, standing next to Tran Tin, immediately interjected, "Second brother." There was a large red scar on his forehead, which now looked even more shiny. Sino 2C glanced up at the top of the mountain, looked proud, smiled and said, "Today we're going to unleash a massive killing spree." Hearing that, everyone around them smiled maliciously. At that moment, a group of people appeared on the pass leisurely advancing. Everyone wears white Ao dye. The leader is Kim Phi, the leader of Bitch Ba Bang, with an unusually youthful and handsome appearance. Since knowing his true identity, he took back his father's last name, La, so now he is La Kim Phi. Walking next to him is Fien Ma from the past, now the owner of Lang Hu Valley. On his left is Lai Hong, nicknamed Van Sun Phi Fong, Fach Han, wearing a pink shirt and a pink cloak. Behind the three people are Bien Ho and Ho Fong. These two people's martial arts were personally taught by Kim Phi, and have reached the upper level, enough to compete with the Koi Dao team's leader, Gong Pham. Next was the Five Knights of Steel, then after Gong Pham there were 12 members of the Koi Dao team. A total of 25 people slowly walked to the top of the mountain. On the surface, the steps seem slow, but in reality the pace is incredibly fast. Their majestic aura makes any martial artist who sees them tremble. Reaching the top, Kim Phi stopped. Everyone immediately followed and stood still. Lai Hong looked surprised, his lips moved slightly, and he used his voice to quietly whisper to Kim Phi, "Mr. Phi, there are a lot of people gathered here. Most of them are notorious villains of the underworld from decades ago." Kim Phi chuckled, turned around and asked again, "Why? Hong, are you scared?" Lai Hong pouted and replied, "What are you afraid of?" On the top of the mountain, most people flashed a contemptuous smile, but in the blink of an eye, everyone immediately became serious. Even though they knew that the other guys were all famous gangsters for many years, when they saw with their own eyes the 25 people who had just appeared, they couldn't help but be surprised. Everyone was an extraordinary character. At that time, Kim Phi clasped his hands in greeting in all directions, then raised his voice and asked, "Who is the owner of today's match?" His voice was gentle, but when it reached the other person's ears, it made his heart tremble. Many people had to quickly calm down to avoid panic. Sino 2C smiled faintly and replied, "This is the old man." As soon as the sound ended, his body was like a wolf rushing in front of Kim Phi, clasping his hands in return. Kim Phi immediately asked, "Did you guys write a card inviting this guild master to come?" Speaking of the word come, he deliberately dragged his feet, waiting for the other person to speak. Sino 2C laughed madly. "The old man's intention is to take your life." Kim Phi's face was cold and he asked in a low voice, "I don't know how my friends plan to get it." Sino 2C laughed like a madman, his voice full of madness. "There are two paths for you to choose from. One is to bow your head in submission and let the old man take the lead to suppress the world's martial arts. Second, die right here. Whichever path you want to choose is up to you." Langhu Valley Master stood next to Kim Phi and coughed softly, interjecting, "Unexpectedly, after being absent for decades, Brother Sino would see the world as so small." Sino 2C glanced at him and coldly replied, "Even you." Langhu Valley Master just smiled and said leisurely, "Brother Sai Confucian, I'm afraid that the title Lord of the Heavens has fascinated you too deeply." Sino 2C smiled creepily. "Don't say unnecessary words. Before the sun reaches its zenith, you still have some time to think. This is the final favor." Before he finished speaking, Kim Phi coldly interrupted, without many words. "Our answer is only one word." Dozens of people heard this and were stunned. Sino 2C is famous for being cruel and quiet. I don't understand why today he is so talkative. Even though he had guessed the words Kim Phi was about to say, he still asked in a harsh voice, "What is your answer?" "The old man advises you to think carefully." Kim Phi laughed loudly and replied boldly, "My answer is, no." As soon as the word no finished, the atmosphere on the top of the mountain immediately became extremely tense. Kim Phi immediately shouted, "There is another way that can be considered compromise." Sino 2C was stunned for a moment. Kim Phi looked straight at his face, then swept his eyes in all directions, coldly continuing, "You either withdraw completely, or completely give up your previous lifestyle and reform. Otherwise, I will kill you all." As soon as the words ended, everyone's faces changed. No one expected that on this mountain top. Their side had more than 60 people but still could not threaten Kim Phi's group of only 20 people. Sino 2C became even more angry, the hair on his head almost stood up. He laughed. "Okay. Very good." Kim Phi coldly waved his hand. The Bitch Ba Bang brothers immediately took off their white AO dye, revealing their red battle clothes like fire. Then there were clanging sounds and 25 people simultaneously drew their weapons. Suddenly, a howl rang out, clear and gentle like the sound of a phoenix singing from afar. Hearing that sound, everyone was chatting, wondering if any other experts would appear. Someone whispered softly, "Is American swordsman La Femme not dead yet?" As soon as the voice ended, a figure appeared. Between Kim Fi and Sino 2C appeared a middle-aged man with handsome appearance, elegant demeanor, and unusually proud weapons. As soon as he appeared, he looked at Kim Fi with kind eyes and smiled. The entire opposing side simultaneously gasped in horror. "Oh! La Femme! He's not dead yet! America looking for customers!" Kim Fi loudly called, "Father!" Tears welled up in his eyes. He strode forward, spreading his arms wide to hug the father he had missed for so many years. Sino 2C suddenly laughed like a crying ghost. "Okay, great. Father and son, let's rush together." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand to make a move. Two powerful winds shot straight into Kim Fi's vital point. American swordsman La Femme shouted in a low voice, waved a palm, and the mighty wind rushed out to meet him, immediately neutralizing Sino 2C's attack. At that moment, Kim Fi shouted loudly, "Father, let me destroy him." Before he finished speaking, he rushed forward and directly attacked Sino 2C. Just as La Femme was stunned, he heard a boom sound that echoed across the world. As soon as the two figures of Kim Fi and Sino 2C separated, they immediately entwined with each other. Everyone could only see a swirling blue light, a flickering silhouette, accompanied by dozens of halos soaring like a brilliant rainbow. Seeing that scene, La Femme burst into laughter and shouted loudly, "Phuong Tran Tien, let's have a fight." As soon as the sound ended, he swung his sword and rushed straight to attack Phuong Tran Tien. At that moment, Phu Ko Kim Loyon swung a pair of cast-iron hammers and rushed forward. Long Dying pulled out a strange weapon, Lao Tien used his dual palms, and Bak Kat and Quan used Bak Kat's claw to rush straight into the enemy formation, making heavy attacks. The five knights also laughed loudly, simultaneously drawing their short swords, spears and swords, and rushed into the melee. Gong Pham raised his curved sword high and led Koi Dao's team into a whirlwind about 5 meters wide, like a huge wave rushing straight into the black-clad enemy. Langhu Valley Master also pulled out a purple fan that was more than a meter long and glided forward to attack the opponent. Lai Hong pulled the non-fatched sword from its scabbard and stood behind Kim Fi to press the battle. But suddenly a rude voice rang out, "That girl, let the boss receive you first." Before he finished speaking, that person rushed to attack Lai Hong. She was angry to the extreme, swinging her sword and counterattacking furiously. In just a moment, an earth-shattering battle, rarely seen in hundreds of years, broke out. The scene was extremely fierce, the world was sad and miserable, hundreds of masters rushed to kill in chaos, bystanders could hardly distinguish who belonged to which side, because everyone was the top martial artist of the time. The battle became more and more intense, the shouting and killing mixed with the sound of clashing weapons echoed throughout the mountains and forests. The sun gradually rose higher, the brighter the light, the more pitiful the screams became. Fresh blood splashed like rain, dyeing the mountaintop red. On the ground gradually appeared countless severed limbs, blood flowed down the mountainside, and many people were thrown from the top of the mountain and fell straight into the abyss. The sun gradually set to the west, the ravines were filled with fresh blood flowing down. Thanks to the close coordination between swords and swords, the Bitch Ba Bang brothers achieved a rare feat. The number of people injured or killed in battle was so small that it surprised everyone. At this time, there were only more than 10 enemies left on the battlefield. Phuong Tran Tien was slashed by La Femme's sword and his body fell straight into the abyss. Tran Tin, Thuan Quan Hong, Ta Fong and others were beaten to death by the 5 knights, 3 diamonds and Bak Kat and Quan. Some people who were arrogant in their martial arts skills and refused to cooperate were also cut down by random swords. Suddenly there was a crazy roar. "Go home and meet your master." Oh my! Fresh blood splashed. Loyon shouted and swung his mace, killing another enemy. But the old knight's left hand was also seriously injured, with blood dripping from it. In the sword formation of the Koi Dao team, 2 more terrible screams rang out. The shadows of people on the top of the mountain gradually thinned out. On the enemy side, the dead collapsed on the spot, the cowardly ran away, the injured and exhausted also fell, leaving not many people standing on the top of the mountain. At that time, only Sino 2C was still fighting fiercely with King Phi. Almost everyone of Bitch Ba Bang's brothers had injuries. As for Loyan and Bien Ho, because they were too brave, they were seriously injured and could no longer move. The others still stood around, attentively watching the match. This time, Lai Hong had to deal with 3 enemies alone, but thanks to the support of her teammates, she still felt unsatisfied, even though she had killed all 3 of them. At that time La Femme was present. She did not say a word, just quietly watched the decisive battle in front of her. Suddenly, the 2 people in battle faced each other. Strange howls mixed with pitiful screams rang out. A tall, muscular figure was thrown into the air. Long Dain laughed loudly, waved his hand and slashed hard. Immediately a dragon-like purple light flew up and crashed straight into that figure. God! As soon as the pitiful screams ended, blood rained down from the sky. Sino 2C's body was slashed by Long Dain's strange weapon. Both his body and weapon fell hard to the ground. As expected, the devil's reputation once frightened the black and white martial arts. Even though he was hit by King Phi's palm and was hit by Long Dain with another knife, Sino 2C only staggered a few steps before forcing himself to stand up, quickly repeatedly pressing on acupuncture points to stop the bleeding. The self-healing technique is lightning fast. Just when Long Dain was still surprised, Sino 2C let out a scream that shook the whole mountaintop, poured all his energy into his 2 palms. One palm struck towards King Phi, the other palm struck straight at Long Dain. The palm of his hand has appeared, but his figure is blurred and difficult to grasp. As soon as King Phi glanced at him, he realized that the opponent had used his last single palm. He immediately dodged and stood in front of Long Dain, raising his left palm to block. Bang! Huh! After that muffled cry, the black-headed old ghost staggered back a few steps and fell to the ground. In the middle of the battle, King Phi stood stunned, his long sword hanging down in his hand. Just hearing a swoosh sound, the Bitch Van's sword was embedded more than 3 meters deep into the rock face, and his body slowly fell down. Then there were cries of panic. Phi Ni! Mr. Phi! Boss! Several figures quickly rushed to the middle of the arena, supporting King Phi. La Femme hugged him, tears welling up. Lai Hong also knelt next to him, crying without a sound. Lang Hu Valet Master immediately checked his pulse. After a while, his face relaxed and he happily said, "It's okay, it can definitely be saved." More than 20 pairs of eyes were still glued to King Phi without leaving. Hearing those words, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The worry on their faces immediately disappeared, replaced by joy and relief. La Femme carried King Phi and slowly left the mountainside step by step. Everyone quietly followed. In just a moment, their shadows disappeared completely. On the top of the mountain, only dead bodies remained, seriously injured people lying groaning, broken limbs scattered everywhere, mixed with fresh blood all over the grass. It is not a pity that those people died miserably, because only when they are destroyed can the martial arts world be at peace and the world can enjoy peace. You just finished listening, the final episode of the series, Ancient Swordplay. The Divine Palm appeared. Please comment your feelings after listening to the story, and don't forget to subscribe to hear the latest stories.